Picture a room with no windows you can see out of, somewhere beneath a city in the northeast of America, where the air is kept cool and dry and perfectly still, and the light is low and even and gives away nothing about the hour. There is a long table here, pale and clean, and a foam cradle resting upon it, the kind shaped to hold an old book open without straining its spine. And in that cradle waiting is a small thing, a book about the size of a hardcover novel you might hold in one hand. A little taller than it is wide, its cover plain and worn and giving no clue at all about what is inside. It does not look like much. That is the first thing to know about it, and it is worth letting that be your first thought tonight, here in the quiet, that the strangest book in the world looks at rest in its cradle like nothing at all. There is nothing here you need to hold on to. No name you must remember, no thread you must keep hold of. Let the words come slowly, at whatever pace the night allows, and let yourself drift down, gently, towards sleep. This is the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, in the city of New Haven, and the room we have come to is deep inside it, below the surface, where the most fragile things are kept. The building above us is famous in its own quiet way, a great cube lifted off the ground on four-cornered piers, its walls made not of brick or ordinary glass, but of thin panels of Vermont marble, cut so fine that during the day a soft amber light comes glowing through them, as though the whole building were a lamp turned low. The marble does a gentle kind of work. It lets a little light in, but it strains out the harsher part of sunlight, the part that fades ink and dries old skin, so that the books inside live always in a warm, dim glow that never quite reaches the brightness of day. At the heart of that cube stands a tower of glass, 6 stories of it, holding tens of thousands of volumes stacked floor to ceiling behind clear walls, climbing up into the amber light. But the rarest things are not up in the tower. They are down here below ground, in rooms where the temperature does not change and the humidity does not change, and the air is held steady year upon year, so that what is fragile can keep being fragile a little longer without falling apart. Down here, the noise of the world does not reach. There are no footsteps from the street above, no weather, no sense of season. A reading room like this one runs on a quieter set of rules, soft voices, slow movements, hands washed and dry, no pens allowed near the pages, only pencil, only patience. People come here to sit with objects that are centuries old and to turn their leaves one at a time, gently, the way you would lift a sleeping child. To even reach a room like this, you give up the small, busy things you carry through an ordinary day. The bag is left in a locker. The pen stays behind. The phone goes quiet in a pocket or is set aside altogether. You sign your name in a book and say which object you have come to see, and then you wait, and someone goes away into the deeper rooms and comes back carrying it slowly in 2 hands, the way you would carry something that could not be replaced if it broke. There is a deliberate slowness to all of it, a ceremony of care, and the slowness itself is part of why these rooms feel so restful. Nothing here can be hurried, nothing here wants to be. And of all the objects this library holds, and it holds a great many, some older and some grander and some far more valuable in money, there is one that draws more letters, more visitors, more sleepless curiosity than any of the rest. It sits in the catalog under a plain and unremarkable label, Manuscript 408, MS 408, a number, nothing more. And yet people have crossed oceans to sit with it, and spent whole careers thinking about it, and gone, some of them, a little out of their minds over it. The library long ago made careful photographs of every page and put them out into the world freely, so that anyone with an evening and a curious mind can turn its leaves on a screen without ever leaving home, and in a way that has only deepened the spell of the thing, because now thousands of people sit up at night in rooms all over the world, scrolling slowly through the same impossible pages, looking for the pattern that has never once shown itself. The book gathers all of them, the scholars in the cool reading room and the dreamers at their kitchen tables, into one long, unbroken company of the puzzled. You are joining them now, in your own quiet way, here in the dark. Let us look at it as it rests there before we open anything, before we ask any questions. It is small. The measurements are on file, a little under 10 inches tall, around 6.5 inches across, and about 2 inches thick when the covers are closed. That is a book you could slip into a coat pocket. It is not a great heavy folio meant to lie on a lectern in a cathedral. It is a private-sized book, a book made to be held by one person, close in the lap or on a table by a single candle. The covers are limp and plain, made of soft vellum, with no title stamped on the spine, no gold tooling, no decoration to announce itself. If you found it in a box of old books at an estate sale, you might pass it by. The whole of its strangeness is hidden inside, and from the outside it keeps that strangeness completely. The pages within are vellum, animal skin, scraped and stretched and smoothed and cut down into lathes, the way nearly all books were made before paper became common. Making vellum was slow and exacting work in itself. The skin had to be soaked and limed and scraped clean of every hair, then stretched on a frame and dried tight and rubbed smooth until it would take ink without bleeding. A book this size would have used the skins of many animals, each leaf once part of a living thing that grazed in some field 600 years gone. There are something on the order of 240 pages still bound into it, though scholars believe a number of leaves have gone missing over the centuries, lost or removed before anyone thought to count carefully. The skin has aged to the soft color of old cream, here and there gone slightly brown at the edges where hands have held it, and the leaves are thin and supple and faintly translucent when the light comes from behind them. Some of the pages are ordinary in size, the size of the closed book, but others are not, others are folded. Here and there throughout the volume, a page opens out beyond the edge of the book into a larger sheet, folded once or twice or even more, so that to see the whole of what is drawn there you must unfold it carefully outward, the way you unfold a map. One of them, the largest, opens into a great sheet 6 panels wide. These fold-outs are part of what makes the book feel alive in the hand, part of what has drawn people to it for 100 years. The sense that the book keeps more inside it than its small closed shape suggests, that it has been folded up like something secret, waiting to be opened. And we will open it over the long hours ahead slowly, page by page, with no hurry at all, but not yet. For now it is enough to know that it is here, resting in its cradle in the still cool air, and that it has been waiting a very long time. Imagine, if you like, simply looking at it where it lies, the closed covers gone soft and a little uneven with age, the edges of the leaves showing in a pale, ragged stack, some pages bulging slightly where the fold-outs are tucked away inside, the whole small weight of it holding still in the even light. It gives off no glow, it makes no sound, it does not look back at you. It only sits there closed, the way it has sat closed in 100 rooms across 600 years, keeping everything inside itself, asking nothing, offering nothing, perfectly and patiently at rest. There is no hurry in it at all, and there need be none in you. Because here is the thing about this small, plain book, the thing that has kept it from sinking quietly into the catalog like 10,000 other old volumes around it. No one can read it, not a word. From the first page to the last, the book is filled with writing line after line, page after page, in a flowing, confident, practiced hand, the strokes even and unhesitating, the way someone writes who knows exactly what they mean to say. There are paragraphs. There are what look like headings and labels and lists. The text wraps around the illustrations and fills the margins and runs on neat and steady for tens of thousands of words. By every outward sign, it is a book that was written to be read, and yet in more than 100 years of trying, and people have tried, and we will meet some of them later in the night, no one has ever read a single sentence of it with any certainty. No one knows what language it is in. No one knows what alphabet it uses. No one even knows for certain whether it is a language at all. Sit with that for a moment, gently, the way you might sit with a strange light on the far horizon. A book, written in a hand as fluent as your own, filled with words that no living person and no dead scholar has ever been able to understand. The letters are not the letters we know. They are their own shapes, looping, curling characters, some like our letters glimpsed in a dream and then changed, some like nothing in any alphabet anyone has ever identified. They have been studied and counted and sorted into groups. There seem to be a few dozen distinct characters, used over and over, combined into what certainly look like words, and the words behave in some ways the way real words behave. Some appear often, some rarely, some seem to belong only to certain parts of the book. But the language itself, the meaning beneath the shapes, has never opened. And the deeper anyone looks, the stranger it becomes, because the writing does not behave the way pure nonsense behaves, and it does not quite behave the way any known language behaves either. It sits in some quiet country in between. When people have measured it, counting how often each word appears, where it falls on the line, how the words cluster and repeat, they have found patterns too orderly to be the work of someone scribbling at random, and yet too odd to belong to any tongue we know. Certain words repeat 2 and 3 times in a row, one after another, the way no ordinary writing repeats. Some words appear only at the start of a line, others only at the end. The shapes of the words shift slowly as you move from the front of the book to the back, as though the writer's habits drifted over the months, or as though the early pages and the late pages were speaking in slightly different dialects of the same unknown thing. It has the texture of meaning everywhere you press on it, and yet it never yields any. That is the particular ache of it, not the blank wall of a thing that is clearly gibberish, but the half-open door of a thing that looks always as though it is just about to make sense. Scholars have a name for the script, a placeholder name, because you have to call a thing something. They call it Voyniches. And that name itself is borrowed, as we will see, from a man who did not write the book and did not understand it either, but who pulled it out of obscurity and gave it back to the world about 100 years ago. And it is not only the writing. The book is full of pictures, and the pictures are as strange as the words. There are plants, page after page of them, drawn in faded green and brown and red, plants with roots and leaves and flowers laid out the way an old herbal lays out its plants, as if to tell you what each one is and what it might be good for. Except that the plants do not match any plants that grow on this earth. Botanists have pored over them, and now and again someone says, perhaps that one is a sunflower, perhaps that is a water lily. But mostly the plants are no plants at all, leaves joined to the wrong roots, flowers that belong to no living family, as though someone had dreamed a garden and drawn it from memory. There are circular diagrams, great wheels with the look of star charts, suns and moons and rings of tiny stars, the kind of thing an astronomer of long ago might draw to map the heavens. There are pages crowded with small figures of women, bathing in green pools and winding channels of water, connected by pipes and tubes that seem to mean something to whoever drew them. And running alongside all of it, labeling everything, explaining everything, is the writing that no one can read. The pictures promise to tell you what the words mean, and the words promise to tell you what the pictures mean. And between the two of them, they tell you nothing at all that you can be sure of. The whole book is a closed circle, an object that looks from every angle like it ought to make sense, and then quietly refuses to. We will visit each of those strange territories in its own quiet hour. We will spend time with the impossible plants and try to understand why they grow the way they do. We will look up into the wheels of stars and the rings of figures and ask what someone was trying to chart. We will wander the green pools where the little bathing figures gather. We will meet the people who have tried hardest to crack the writing open, the codebreakers and the scholars and the dreamers, some of them among the finest minds of their time, and we will see how each of them in turn met the same blank wall. But all of that is for later. For now there is only the book itself, small and closed and patient in the cool still air, and the simple astonishing fact of it. It exists, it is real. You could go and see it more or less if you arranged it well enough in advance. And no one knows what it says. It helps here at the beginning to set the question of its age beside the question of its meaning, because the age of the thing is one of the few facts about it that is not a mystery at all. For a long time no one knew when the book was made, and people guessed wildly. Some thought it might be only a few centuries old. Others wondered if it might be a modern forgery, made up out of nothing to fool collectors. But a little while ago a few of the leaves were tested very carefully by measuring the slow, steady decay of carbon in the vellum, the way the age of any old organic thing can be measured, and the answer came back clear and narrow and certain. The skins on which the book is written came from animals that lived in the first part of the 1400s, somewhere in the window between 1404 and 1438, the early 15th century. That is real, that is settled. The vellum, at least, is genuinely 600 years old. Let that age settle over the book as it rests in front of you. 600 years, when the skins of this book were new and blank and waiting, Europe was a different world entirely. The printing press had not yet been built. Every book was still written out by hand, one stroke at a time, a labor of months. Columbus would not cross the ocean for most of a century yet. The great cathedrals were still rising. And somewhere in some room we cannot picture, by some light we cannot name, a person we will never identify sat down with these blank cream-colored leaves and a pen and a few pots of colored ink, and began with great care and great patience and a steady, fluent hand to fill them with a book that no one in all the 600 years since has ever been able to read. We do not know who they were. We do not know where they sat. We do not know whether they were recording true knowledge in a secret code, or copying something older they themselves did not understand, or building an elaborate and beautiful nothing, a book that was always meant to be unreadable. All of that is ahead of us, out in the dark, waiting to be approached slowly. Tonight, we only stand at the doorway and look in. There is something restful when you let it be in a mystery this old and this contained. It asks nothing of you. The book is not going anywhere. It has waited 600 years, and it sat in the dark of one library after another for most of that time, passing from hand to hand, from collector to collector, often forgotten for long stretches, sometimes lost from the record entirely, only to surface again. It survived wars and fires and the simple, slow forgetting that swallows most old things. It survived being unreadable, which is the very thing that should have doomed it. A book no one can read is a book with no obvious use, and useless things are usually the first to be thrown away. And yet here it is. Somehow, through all those centuries, enough people felt that this strange small object was worth keeping, worth saving from the fire and the damp and the rubbish heap, that it came down through all that time intact and arrived at last in a cool, quiet room beneath a marble building in Connecticut, to be cradled and protected and studied and loved. There is a kind of tenderness in that long survival when you think of it. The world kept this thing it could not understand, simply because it was beautiful and strange, and because someone always could not quite bear to let it go. You do not need to understand it tonight either. No one ever has, and the night does not require it of you. We are not here to solve it, not now, perhaps not ever, perhaps that is not even the point. We are here only to sit with it for a few slow hours in the dark, the way you might sit with any beautiful unanswered question, turning it over gently, letting it be large enough to hold more than one possibility at once. That is the most comfortable way to hold a mystery, in the end, loosely, without gripping, the way you hold the last waking thoughts of the day before they slip into something softer. So let the building settle around you. Picture the great marble cube above, glowing faintly amber in whatever light the day has left, the tower of books standing silent at its heart, the long stairs and the cool corridors leading down. Picture the still air of the room, kept always at the same gentle temperature, neither warm nor cold, the same dry hush that has held this book steady for years and will hold it steady for years to come. There are no clocks down here that you need to watch. There is no weather. There is only the even quiet light, and the long pale table, and the small plain book in its foam cradle, its covers closed, its secret folded up inside, patient as it has always been. In a little while we will reach out and open it. We will turn to the first leaf and let our eyes move slowly over the impossible plants and the looping unreadable words, and we will begin, gently and without any hope of finishing, the oldest game this book has ever offered anyone, the game of trying to understand. We will lose, of course. Everyone loses. But it is a soft and beautiful kind of losing, the kind that asks nothing and harms no one, and only leaves you, in the end, with a deeper sense of how much of the world remains quietly, peacefully beyond our knowing. But that is for the next quiet hour, for now the book stays closed. For now there is only the cool still room and the low amber light somewhere far above, and the small worn volume resting in front of you, 600 years old and silent, keeping its long patient secret in the dark, the way it always has, the way it may always do. It does not need you to read it. It has never needed anyone to read it. It has been content all this time simply to exist, to be turned over now and then by curious hands and then set down again, unsolved, unhurried, unbroken by all the wondering aimed at it. Let your breathing slow to match the stillness of the air. Let the question rest unopened, the way the book rests unopened, neither of you in any hurry at all. The mystery will be here when the next chapter begins, exactly as it has been for 6 centuries, waiting, patient, unreadable, and entirely at peace with not being understood. You may be at peace with it too. There is nothing here to solve tonight. There is only the quiet in the old book, and the long, soft dark settling over the room like a hand laid gently across the page. Breathe out, let the day go with it. The library holds the book, and the dark holds the library, and you are held by both, safe and warm and far from anything that needs answering. Sleep well, the first leaf will be waiting. Imagine a workshop somewhere in Central Europe, 600 years ago, on a cool gray morning with the light coming flat and even through a small window. There is a wooden frame standing upright against the wall, taller than a man, and stretched across it, lashed at its edges with cords, is a skin. A calf's skin, scraped and soaked and stretched, drawn so tight across the frame that it hums faintly when the air moves. A man stands before it with a curved blade in his hand, a lunellum, a knife shaped like the crescent moon, and he draws it slowly across the surface of the skin, paring away the last of what does not belong, the hair, the flesh, the grease, working it thinner and thinner, smoothing it towards something pale and clean and almost translucent, something that will one day hold ink and keep it for centuries. This is how a page begins. Not with words, not with thought, but with an animal and a frame and a patient hand drawing a moon-shaped blade across a stretched white skin in the cool morning light. There is no hurry in the work, there cannot be. The skin will tear if it is rushed, and so the man goes slowly, and we will go slowly with him, into the quiet making of the strangest book in the world. The skin has already been through a great deal by the time it reaches the frame. It was washed first in clean water to soften it and to take away the worst of the blood and dirt. Then it was soaked for days, sometimes weeks, in a bath of water and lime, an alkaline bath that loosened the hair from the follicle and began to dissolve the fats and the flesh that clung to the underside. The lime bath is patient work too. The skin sits in it and changes slowly, and the maker waits and tests it with a finger and waits some more. When the hair will slip free at the touch of a blade, the skin is hauled dripping from the bath and laid over a curved beam of wood, and the hair is pushed away in long wet sweeps, and the flesh is scraped from the other side until what remains is the middle layer of the skin, the true substance of it, neither hair nor meat, but the pale, dense stuff in between. And only then is it lashed to the frame and stretched and pared again and again, as the light comes and goes through the small window until it is ready. This is parchment when it is made from the skin of a calf and made fine. The older books call it vellum, from the same root as the word veal, the skin of a young animal, soft and close-grained and pale. It was the writing stuff of the medieval world, the thing that books were made of before paper came west and took its place. A skin like this one was costly to make and costly to ruin. Every calf gave only so much usable surface, and the best, finest, palest pages came from the youngest animals, whose skin had not yet thickened or coarsened with age. A maker learned to read the skin as it dried, to feel where it was sound and where it was thin, to find the small scars and insect bites and old healed wounds that every living animal carries, and to work around them, for parchment, unlike paper, remembers the body it came from. Hold a leaf of it up to the light even now, and you may see the faint pattern of follicles where the hair once grew, and the slight difference between the side that faced the world and the side that faced the flesh. The hair side a touch darker and rougher, the flesh side a touch paler and smoother. A medieval bookmaker arranging the finished leaves would try, by long habit, to face hair side to hair side and flesh side to flesh side as the pages opened, so that the eye moving across an opening met a matched and even surface. It is the kind of quiet care that no reader was ever meant to notice, and yet it is there, the small, considered habits of a real craft practiced by real and ordinary hands. And vellum is the thing the Voynich Manuscript is made of. Every leaf of it, every one of the soft, creamy pages we sat with in the quiet library, began exactly like this, as a calf, and then a skin stretched on a frame in some workshop in the early 15th century, scraped thin by a hand we will never know, in a place we cannot name. You may let that thought settle over you as gently as the lime settles in the bath. The book did not begin as a riddle. It began as an animal and a craft and a great deal of unhurried, ordinary work. We know the century with an unusual confidence, and it is worth knowing how. In the year 2009, a team of scientists at the University of Arizona was given something rare and precious, permission to cut 4 small slivers from the margins of the manuscript itself. They took them from the edges of 4 separate leaves, narrow strips no larger than a sliver of fingernail, chosen from the blank margins where no ink had ever fallen. And they subjected those slivers to radiocarbon dating, the method by which the slow, steady decay of carbon in once-living things can be read like the hands of a clock, telling you not the hour but the century in which the thing was last alive. The calf, in other words, breathing in a field. The results came back close together, clustered tightly the way the truth tends to cluster. The animals whose skins became these pages had lived and died, all 4 of them, in a narrow window between roughly 1404 and 1438, the early 15th century. The age of the great cathedrals already standing of Europe before the printing press, of a world that wrote everything it kept by hand on the skins of animals, one slow leaf at a time. It is worth pausing on how strange and how comforting that certainty is, because so little else about this book can be pinned down. We do not know who made it, we do not know where, we do not know what language it is in, or whether it is a language at all, or what a single one of its hundreds of thousands of careful characters is meant to say. We do not know how it traveled in those first uncertain centuries, from the hand that wrote it to the libraries and collectors who would later puzzle over it. But this one thing the science gives us plainly and without argument: the skin is genuinely old, and old in a way no forger of a later age could have faked. The calves were real, and they were alive in the years just after the year 1400, and that is as solid a fact as anything in the whole long history of the book. You may hold to it like a handrail in the dark. That clustering matters more than it might seem at first, and you can turn it over slowly in the dark like a smooth stone. 4 leaves chosen from across the book, and all 4 dating to the same narrow span of years. That tells you the parchment came from a single batch, very likely a single herd, slaughtered around the same season and prepared together as one stock of writing skin. Some scholars have reckoned that the whole book required the skins of 14 or 15 calves, perhaps more, to make all its leaves. Imagine that drifting, an entire small herd given over to a single book, their skins pooled and stretched and paired and sewn, so that one strange, unreadable volume could exist. And the consistency of the dating does something quiet and important besides. It makes a forgery very nearly impossible. A clever faker of later centuries might find a single old blank leaf to write upon, but no one could plausibly gather 14 entire unused calfskins, all from the same early 15th century herd, all kept blank and uncut for hundreds of years, simply to perpetrate a hoax. The skins are old, the skins are genuine. Whatever the book is, it was made when its pages say it was made. So picture the leaves themselves now, finished and trimmed and gathered. Each large sheet of parchment was folded once down the middle, making 2 leaves, 4 pages, front and back. Several of these folded sheets were nested one inside another, the way you might nest a few sheets of folded paper to make a small booklet, and then sewn through the fold along the spine sewn, in this book, onto 3 cords or thongs of leather, the stitches passing through the combined fold and binding the nested sheets into a single unit. Such a unit, a little bundle of folded nested sheets, is called a gathering or quire. A book in this era was not one continuous thing, but a stack of these quires, each sewn and then bound together in sequence, the way a wall is made of separate courses of brick. The Voynich Manuscript was built of around 20 such quires, of which 18 survive, and within them the leaves, somewhere around 240 surviving pages, give or take, out of more than that which the book once held. Some leaves have gone missing across the centuries, cut out or lost or fallen away. Here and there in the binding you can still see the stub of a leaf that was sliced from its fold, a small ghost of a page that is no longer there. The pages are not all the same size, and this is one of the loveliest small surprises of the book. Most are ordinary leaves, a little taller than they are wide, about the size of a modern hardback held in the hand. But scattered through the manuscript are larger sheets, folded down to fit within the book and meant to be opened out fold-outs, the medieval equivalent of a map tucked into the back of an atlas, panels that unfold to 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 times the width of a normal page. One of them, the largest, opens into an enormous sheet near 45 centimeters on a side, with an extra fold to let it tuck away, a great spread of diagram that the maker plainly felt no single page could hold. You can imagine the reader of long ago, whoever they were, unfolding that great panel by candlelight, the parchment crackling softly as it opened, the strange wheeling design spreading out across the table, and then, when they were done, folding it carefully closed again and turning to the next quiet quire. We will come to what is drawn on those great pages in the nights ahead. For now it is enough to feel the shape of the book in your hands, mostly small, mostly even, and then, every so often, a page that wants to be larger than the others, a page that opens like a wing. Now to the ink, which is the next part of the making and the part where the words begin. Set the finished parchment on a table and imagine, beside it, a small pot. Inside the pot is a dark liquid, brownish-black, the standard ink of medieval Europe, iron gall ink, made from a recipe so old and so reliable that it served the Western world for more than 1,000 years. It begins, strangely enough, with a wasp. A certain small wasp lays its eggs in the twigs of oak trees, and the tree, irritated, swells up a hard round growth around the intrusion, an oak gall, a little woody apple of plant tissue, rich in a bitter substance called tannin. These galls were gathered and crushed and steeped in water or wine until the tannin leached out into a dark, astringent liquid. To that was added iron, usually in the form of a salt called green vitriol, iron dissolved into crystal, and the moment the iron met the tannin, the liquid darkened, the way a cut apple darkens, and an ink was born. A little gum arabic, the dried sap of the acacia tree, was stirred in to thicken it and help it cling. And there it was, a dark flowing ink that bit slightly into the surface of the parchment and held there permanent for centuries. There is a quiet magic in that recipe when you sit with it. The ink does not merely rest on the page like a layer of paint. It reacts with the surface, it sinks in and binds, the iron and the tannin marrying into a compound that the parchment will not easily give up. It is why medieval writing has lasted as it has, why a document set down 600 years ago can still be read today as clearly as the morning it was written. The ink goes on at first a pale gray-brown, almost faint, and then it darkens as it dries and as the iron meets the air, deepening over hours and days into the rich brown-black we know, so that a scribe writing a page would watch his own words grow darker and surer behind him as he worked down the leaf, the early lines already deep, the freshest still pale and wet at the nib. When scientists examined the ink of the Voynich Manuscript, this is very nearly exactly what they found. Under the careful eye of analysis, the inks showed iron and sulfur and potassium and calcium with small traces of copper, the chemical signature of iron gall ink, the ordinary writing fluid of its age. There is nothing exotic in it, nothing imported from far away, nothing that whispers of secret laboratories or alchemical strangeness. It is the same ink that a clerk would have used to copy a Bible, or a merchant to keep his accounts, or a monk to record the doings of his abbey. Whoever made this book reached for the most common ink in Europe and wrote with it the way you might reach for the nearest pen. And the instrument was a quill, a feather, cut and trimmed to a point, dipped in the dark pot and drawn across the pale skin, the split nib laying down its thin and thick strokes as the hand moved. A feather, an oak gall, a wasp, a calf, a frame in the morning light. The most extraordinary unreadable book in the world is made at bottom of the plainest and most ordinary things. There is something almost tender in that if you let yourself feel it. We expect a mystery to be wrapped in mystery, to be made of rare and secret materials that match its strangeness. We half expect the page itself to be impossible, but it is not. It is a calf and a feather and a wasp's gall and a crystal of iron, the same humble things 1,000 forgotten clerks used to write 1,000 forgotten letters. The strangeness is not in the stuff of the book at all. The strangeness is only in the meaning, and the meaning is the one thing you cannot weigh or measure or hold up to the light. And then there are the colors, for the book is not only written but painted. The plants and the pools and the wheeling diagrams are washed with soft faded pigments, blues and greens and dusty reddish browns, and these too have been examined, and these too turn out to be the common stuff of the period. The blue is azurite, a blue mineral ground to powder, the same blue that colored countless medieval skies and roads. The green is a copper green, the kind that forms when copper corrodes, scraped or salted into a usable paint. The reddish brown is red ochre, an earth pigment, iron-rich clay, hematite, the same red that has colored cave walls since the dawn of human making. None of it is costly, none of it is rare. There is no gold leaf here, no precious imported ultramarine ground from far-off stone, none of the luxury that a wealthy patron's book might flaunt. The colors of the Voynich Manuscript are the colors a careful person of modest means could mix from what was at hand, earth, and corroded copper and crushed blue rock, and they have faded gently over 600 years into the soft, worn palette we see now, the dusty blue and the tired green, and the faded brown of a thing that has been alive a very long time. Here is something to rest in as the making comes together in your mind. The same dark ink appears in the writing and in the drawings. The lines of the plants and the outlines of the little figures are drawn in the very same iron gall ink as the flowing text that winds around them, and the colors were laid in afterward, washed inside the inked outlines. This is one of the small, quiet clues the book gives up about itself, that the words and the pictures were very likely made in close company, the same kind of stroke, the same dark ink, the same hand or hands working in concert. The text is not a later addition crammed around older drawings, nor the drawings a mere decoration added to finished text. They grew together line by line, the writing curling around the pictures and the pictures making room for the writing, as though one mind held the whole strange page at once and set it down in a single unbroken act of making. And what a steady hand it was. When scholars look closely at the writing of the Voynich Manuscript, the thing that strikes them again and again is its confidence. The script flows, it does not hesitate. The strange looping characters run along their lines evenly and quickly, with the easy, unbroken rhythm of someone writing a language they know well, not puzzling out each symbol, not laboring over code, but writing fluently at speed, the way you write a letter to someone you love. There is debate, as there is about everything in this book, over whether it is the work of a single scribe or several working in close concert. Some careful eyes have thought they could distinguish 2 hands, or 3, or as many as 5 by the small habits of the strokes. But whether one hand or a few, what they share is that fluency. No one was sounding out the letters. No one was copying laboriously from a chart. The writing pours onto the page as though it meant something, as though the writer knew exactly what came next. And here is the deepest small strangeness of the making, the one you may carry softest of all down towards sleep. In a book of some 240 pages, written in this dense, flowing, unknown script, there are almost no corrections, no words crossed out, no letters scraped away with a knife and rewritten, the way a medieval scribe would correct an honest mistake. No second thoughts, no false starts, no smudged places where the hand faltered and began again. Look closely enough and you can find a tiny handful of minor emendations across the whole long book, a dozen folios at most with the faintest touch of change. But for the most part, the writer simply wrote page after page after page, fluently and without visible error, never pausing to scratch out what they had set down. Think on what that means. To write a language is to make mistakes, to misspell, to skip a word, to repeat a line, to cross something out and try again. We all do it. Every long handwritten document in the world is freckled with small corrections. But this book, written in a script no one can read, in a language no one can name, was set down across hundreds of pages with the smooth assurance of a thing copied perfectly, or composed perfectly, or known so well that error never came. You do not need to make anything of that tonight. You need not decide whether it proves the book a true language fluently written, or an invented system performed so often that its maker never stumbled, or something else entirely that no one has yet guessed. Let those questions wait. They have waited 600 years, and they are patient. Just hold the picture, the pale calfskin pages, the dark iron gall ink drawn from a wasp's gall in a crystal of iron, the cut feather, the dusty earthen colors, and over it all the steady, fluent hand moving line after line without hesitation and without correction, as though it could not be wrong, as though it had known where it needed to be, but exactly where it was, setting down a meaning we have never been able to share. So let the workshop fade now, the frame and the curved moon blade and the cool gray light through the small window. Let the lime bath and the stretched skin and the patient scraping fade with it. They did their work long ago, the makers of these pages, whoever they were. They raised the calves or bought the skins, they soaked and scraped and stretched and pared. They cut the quills and crushed the galls and ground the blue stone and the red earth. And then someone sat down with all of it gathered around them and began to write fluently in a hand that never faltered, a book that no one since has been able to read. The materials are ordinary, the craft is ordinary. The age is settled and certain, the early 15th century, the calves long since dust in some Central European field. Only the meaning is missing, and the meaning is the one thing the chemistry and the radiocarbon and the careful scholar's eyes can never give us back. There is nothing here you need to solve. The book is made now in your mind, page by pale page, sewn into its quires, the great foldouts tucked and folded, the ink dark and the colors soft and the writing flowing on and on without a single crossed-out word. It is a finished thing, complete and silent, and it rests now exactly as it has rested for 6 centuries, asking nothing. In the nights ahead we will lean closer and turn those pages and look at what was drawn on them, the impossible plants, the wheeling stars, the small bathing figures in their green pools, but not yet. Now there is only the quiet of the work all finished, the workshop empty, the skins all used, the last quill set down beside the dry pot of ink. Let your breath go long and slow to match the long settling quiet of a thing completed at the close of the day. Let the parchment soften in your mind and the ink go dark, and the colors fade gently as colors do across 600 years, and let yourself drift down with them into the soft and unhurried dark, the way a finished page settles closed at last and rests and keeps its silence and asks nothing of anyone at all. Let your eye come to rest on a single line of the writing, somewhere in the middle of a page. It does not matter which page, they are all like this. The light is soft, the kind of low amber light you might read by late at night, and the line waits there on the pale vellum, brown ink gone faintly golden with age. Your eye does what an eye always does with a line of writing. It starts at the left and begins to move right smoothly, the way it has moved across 10,000 pages in your life, expecting the small, familiar click of recognition, the moment when marks become sounds and sounds become meaning. The eye slides along the row of careful shapes, a tall looping character, then a curl, then a row of little linked strokes like a low fence, then a flourish that drops a tail below the line, and it reaches the end of the line and finds that nothing has happened. No click. No meaning, only shapes, beautiful and certain and entirely closed. So the eye goes back and tries again, more slowly this time, and the same thing happens, and you begin to understand the particular feeling that this book has given everyone who has ever bent over it. It is not the feeling of looking at a foreign alphabet, where at least you know that someone, somewhere, could read it aloud. It is the feeling of looking at writing that no living person has ever been able to read at all. This is the heart of the Voynich Manuscript, and it is where we will spend this quiet hour, not on the pictures, the strange plants and the bathing women and the wheeling stars, but on the text itself, the river of small brown letters that runs across nearly every page and has refused, for more than a century of trying, to give up a single sentence of its meaning. There is nothing here you need to solve tonight. The cleverest people who have ever lived have failed to solve it, and they are at rest now, and so may you be. We are only going to look slowly and carefully at what the writing is, at how it moves, and how it is shaped, and at the genuinely strange things that happen when you count it. And the strangeness you will find is a gentle one. It does not frighten. It only deepens, the way water deepens as you wade out from a calm shore. Begin with the simplest thing, the thing the eye noticed first. The writing runs from left to right, and from the top of the page to the bottom, in even horizontal lines, exactly the way these words you are hearing were once written down. There is no mystery in the direction of it. Whoever made this book sat with the page before them and moved their hand from left to right across it, line after line, the way a European scribe of the early 15th century would have moved their hand. And the early 15th century is indeed where this book comes from. Its pages of calfskin vellum carbon dated to somewhere between 1404 and 1438, give or take. The words are separated by small spaces, little gaps in the ink, just as the words in ordinary writing are separated by spaces. So your eye knows where one word ends and the next begins. You can point to a word, you can count the words in a line. The book offers you that much, freely and without trouble. It is only when you ask what the words mean that the door closes. Now look closer at the letters themselves, the individual shapes from which the words are built. They are made simply, most of them are just one or two strokes of the pen, small economical gestures, nothing elaborate, and there are not very many different ones. This is one of the first surprising things. If you go through the whole book and sort the characters into distinct kinds, you find that the alphabet, such as it is, contains only about 20 to 25 different signs. Some scholars count a few more, some a few less, depending on how they decide whether two similar-looking marks are really the same letter or two different ones. And that question itself is part of the puzzle, because the boundaries between the characters are not always perfectly clear. But the number is small in that comfortable range that natural alphabets tend to occupy. Our own Latin alphabet has 26 letters, the Greek has 24. The Voynich script sits right there among them, a modest handful of signs, repeated and recombined across the whole vast length of the book. A few of those signs are worth pausing over because they have a character all their own, and the people who study the book have grown fond of them and given them homely names. There are the tall looping shapes that researchers call the gallows characters, elegant figures that rise high above the line of the writing, sometimes with two loops, sometimes one, occasionally drawn so large and ornate that they stretch up and across to cap the letters beside them like a little roof. The gallows characters tend to appear at the beginnings of words and at the beginnings of lines and paragraphs, standing tall at the front of things, the way a capital letter stands at the front of a sentence, though no one can say for certain that this is what they are doing. There are the rows of linked minim strokes, those low fences of little connected marks that the eye slides over and cannot quite count. And there are characters that look, to a reader of old Latin manuscripts, teasingly familiar shapes that resemble the abbreviations medieval scribes used, the curls and tails that once stood for common Latin endings, so that again and again a reader feels the prickle of half-recognition, the sense that they have very nearly seen this before, just before the feeling dissolves and leaves them holding nothing. And it is of vast length. This is worth letting settle in your mind, because the scale of the thing is part of what makes it so haunting. The manuscript is not a single mysterious page, not a scrap, not a riddle scratched on the back of a letter. It is a whole book, well over 200 pages of it surviving and more that have been lost, and across those pages there are something on the order of 170,000 individual characters. 170,000. Counted up into words, that comes to roughly 35,000 words written out on the pages, drawn from a vocabulary of something like 8,000 distinct word shapes that repeat and recur throughout. That is not the output of a moment's whimsy. That is the labor of a long time, weeks, more likely months, of someone sitting and forming these letters one after another, page after page, with a patience that is almost hard to imagine. Whatever this writing is, somebody meant it. Somebody carried it all the way through. And here's the thing about the way it is written that troubles people most once they notice it. The hand is fluent, the the penmanship flows. When you or I write something in a code, when we stop to encipher each letter, looking up what stands for what, our writing slows and stutters. The pen pauses between the marks while the mind does its small arithmetic. You can see it in genuine enciphered documents from history. The writing has a halting quality, a hesitation baked into the very shapes of the letters because the hand was waiting on the brain. The Voynich script does not do this. The letters run on smoothly, confidently, one flowing into the next at the easy pace of someone writing in a hand they know by heart, the way you might dash off a note to a friend without thinking about the spelling at all. The strokes are even. The rhythm is steady. There is almost none of the crossing out, the hesitation, the second guessing that you would expect from someone laboring over a cipher. Whoever wrote this wrote it the way a person writes their own language, quickly, easily, and as if they understood every word. Take a moment with that because it is one of the quiet wonders of this book. The smoothness of the hand argues that the writer was not encoding anything at all, but simply writing, pouring out, in a script they had completely mastered, words that meant something to them, at the unhurried speed of true fluency. And yet no one can read those words. Both of those things are true at once, and the book holds them together without the slightest strain, the way a still pond holds the sky and the depths in the same calm surface. To study writing like this, the people who work on the manuscript needed a way to talk about it, a way to write the Voynich letters using ordinary letters that a typewriter or a computer could handle, so they could count them and compare them, and pass them back and forth without each person having to draw the strange shapes by hand. And so in the 1990s, two researchers worked out a system for exactly this, and they called it the European Voynich alphabet, later the extensible Voynich alphabet, known to almost everyone simply as EVA. The idea of EVA is gentle and practical. You assign an ordinary Latin letter to each of the Voynich shapes. This particular curl becomes an O. That linked little fence of strokes becomes a sequence of letters. This tall looping character becomes a K or a T, and then you can transcribe a whole page of the mysterious script into a string of plain familiar letters that you can type and search and study. It is important to be clear about what EVA is and is not. It does not claim to know how the script sounds or what it means. It is not a translation, not even a reading. It is only a set of nicknames, a convenient costume of Latin letters thrown over the Voynich shapes so that the human mind and the computer can get a grip on them. When a Voynich scholar writes out a word as, say, QOKEDY, they are not telling you how to pronounce it. They are only giving the shape a handle to hold it by. But once you have those handles, once you can write the whole book out as strings of letters and feed it to a counting machine, something remarkable begins to happen. The text starts to behave statistically like a real language, and this is the deep strangeness at the center of the whole mystery, the thing that has kept serious people circling this book for 100 years when they might more comfortably have dismissed it as nonsense and walked away. Let us go into it slowly because it is beautiful, and because understanding it does not require you to do any arithmetic of your own, only to follow along gently as the patterns reveal themselves. There is a law about language discovered by a man named George Zipp from the early 20th century, and it is one of those quiet truths about the world that feels almost too tidy to be real. Take any large body of ordinary writing, a novel, a newspaper, the collected letters of a long-dead correspondent, and count how often each word appears. You will find that the most common word appears about twice as often as the second most common word, and 3 times as often as the third, and 4 times as often as the fourth, and so on down the long tail of rare words that appear only once or twice in the whole text. The frequencies fall away in a smooth and very particular curve. This holds for English and for Latin, for Chinese and for Russian, for every natural human language anyone has ever checked. It seems to be a fingerprint of language itself, the way meaning gets distributed across words when people actually have something to say. And when you count the words of the Voynich manuscript and plot them out in the same way, the curve appears. The book obeys Zipp's law. Its commonest word towers over the next, which towers over the next in just the smooth descending shape that real language makes. By this measure, the writing is not random gibberish. Random gibberish does not do this. Mining, or something that wears the costume of meaning very well, does this. And there is more, and it goes the same direction. The words of the manuscript have a sensible distribution of lengths, almost none of them shorter than 2 letters, almost none longer than about 10, with the bulk of them clustered in the comfortable middle, exactly the way real words cluster in real languages. The amount of information carried by each word, measured in the cool exact terms that information theory allows, comes out close to what you find in English or Latin, around 10 bits of surprise per word, which is to say the words are about as unpredictable, no more and no less, as the words of a genuine tongue. Page after page, measure after measure, the text passes the tests. It walks like a language and it talks like a language, and if all you did was run the numbers without ever looking at the letters, you would conclude without hesitation that you were holding a book written in some real human speech. But then you look closer than the broad statistics, down into the fine grain of how the letters and words actually sit beside one another, and the strangeness comes creeping back in, and it is a strangeness that no known language quite shares. The first thing is the predictability of the letters themselves. In an ordinary language, knowing one letter tells you something, but not too much about the next. After a Q in English, you can be fairly sure a U is coming, but most letters are followed by a wide and lively range of others, and this freedom is part of what gives a language its texture. In the Voynich script, the letters are far more predictable than that. Once you know a character, the character that follows it is much more constrained, much easier to guess than in any natural language. The text is in this fine-grained sense too smooth, too orderly, too willing to repeat its small habits. Where a real language has a certain restlessness in its letters, the Voynich text has a kind of placid regularity, a rule-bound calm that human languages do not show. And the words have a strict inner architecture that natural words do not obey. When you sort the Voynich words by their shapes, you find that most of them seem to be built from 3 parts in a fixed order, a beginning, a middle, and an end, like beads strung in 3 sections on a thread. Certain characters appear almost only at the start of a word, certain others appear almost only at the finish, certain others sit only in the middle. A word is, more or less, one piece chosen from the front box, plus one from the middle box, plus one from the end box, assembled in that order. Real languages have prefixes and suffixes too, of course, but they are far looser and stranger than this. Real words spill over the edges of any neat scheme. The Voynich words obey the scheme almost too well, as though they were poured into molds. Strangest and most touching of all is the repetition. Open the book in certain places and you will find the same word written 2 times in a row, or even 3, the same shape, copied right beside itself, the way a child might write a word over and over to practice it, or the way a mind caught in a groove might say one thing again and again. In ordinary writing, this almost never happens. In English, you can go pages and pages without a word ever sitting directly beside its own twin. In the Voynich Manuscript, it happens often, sometimes several times on a single page. Little stutters and echoes laid down in that same calm, fluent, unhesitating hand. Whole short passages can be built from a small cluster of very similar words, ringing the changes on a handful of shapes, repeating and varying and repeating again, like a piece of music that keeps circling back to the same few notes. And underneath all of it, threading through the whole book, there is the matter of the 2 voices. Early students of the text notice that the manuscript does not seem to be written in one consistent system throughout, that the writing in some sections behaves differently from the writing in others. The pages full of plants follow one set of habits, with certain words and certain letter patterns favored. The pages of bathing figures and pooling water follow another set, with different favorites and different rhythms. 2 underlying systems, 2 dialects or 2 hands or 2 modes, usually just called the 2 languages of the manuscript, an A and a B, woven through the same book in the same script, as if one writer changed their manner partway, or as if 2 people sat at the same strange task. It is one more layer in a thing that has nothing but layers. So gather it all up now gently, and hold it in your mind the way you would hold a smooth stone, not to crack it open, only to feel its weight. Here is a book of 170,000 careful characters, written fluently and confidently in a small alphabet of about 24 signs, running left to right in tidy lines with the words spaced neatly apart. Count its words and it obeys the deep laws of real language, zips curve, the sensible word lengths, the right measure of information in each word. Look closer and it betrays itself as something no language has ever been, too predictable in its letters, too rigid in the architecture of its words, too fond of repeating itself, and split quietly into 2 systems running side by side. It is language and not language at the same time. It is a door with a keyhole and a handle and the worn shine of 1,000 hands upon it, and behind the door there may be a room, or there may be nothing, and no one has ever been able to tell which. It is worth knowing, as you drift, just how many capable people have spent themselves against this writing and come away with nothing. The text has been worked over by professional codebreakers, the kind of people who pull secrets out of enemy ciphers for a living. One of the most famous of them, an American cryptologist named William Friedman, who broke some of the hardest codes of the 20th century and helped found the modern science of cryptanalysis, spent years of his life turning the Voynich script over in his mind, gathering colleagues into study groups during and after the World Wars to attack it together. With all that skill, all those trained eyes, all the patience in the world, he never read a line of it. Near the end, he set down his best guess, sealed in a clever sentence so that it could not be used against him if he were wrong, and his guess was not that it was a code at all, but that the book might be written in some early attempt at an invented, universal language, a constructed tongue rather than a natural one. A guess, only a guess, from one of the great minds ever to try. And he is only one of a long, quiet procession of brilliant people, scholars and soldiers, linguists and amateurs, each certain they saw the thread that would unravel it, each in the end laying the book down gently and walking away with the thread still uncut. People have wondered, of course, which it is. Some have argued that all of this is the signature of a genuine language written in some clever code we simply have not cracked, that the strange regularities are what the encoding did to a real tongue, smoothing it and patterning it as it locked the meaning away. Others have argued the opposite, that the book is an elaborate invention, a stream of meaningless but language-like shapes generated by some method we have not yet reconstructed, designed to fool the eye and pass the casual tests while saying nothing at all. Still others wonder whether it might be a shorthand or a forgotten dialect or the private script of one strange and solitary mind. And it is genuinely hard to choose between these because the text supports them all and settles none. That very refusal is the most honest thing about it. We will not settle it tonight. There is no shame in that. The finest cryptographers of 2 world wars could not settle it, and they had more reason to than we do, and they let it go in the end and slept. For now it is enough, more than enough, to have looked closely at the writing and to have seen how it moves, the fluent, confident hand laying down its small shapes left to right across the vellum, the words falling into their 3 neat parts, the same word now and then written twice in a row like a soft echo. The whole great river of 170,000 characters obeying in its broad sweep the deep music of human language while up close. Dancing to some private tune that no one else has ever heard, you do not have to read it, no one can, that is allowed. The eye can simply rest on a single line of it, the way it rested at the beginning of this hour, and let the shapes be only shapes, beautiful, certain, closed, and entirely at peace with being unread. The book has kept its silence for 600 years and is in no hurry to break it now. It outwaited the Codebreakers, and it will outwait us, and there is something almost restful in that, in being near a thing so patient that it makes no demand of you at all. Let your own eye go soft on the line. Let the small brown letters blur and run together, the tall gallows shapes leaning gently over the low linked fences of strokes, the words spaced quietly apart, the whole calm river of them flowing on toward the edge of the page. There is nothing to decode here in the dark. There is only the quiet of a thing that was written down with great care, a very long time ago, by a hand that knew exactly what it meant, and the deep, untroubled rest of a question that does not need you to answer it, and never will. Turn the page now slowly in the warm light of the reading room, and a garden opens beneath your hands. Not a real garden, a painted one, 600 years old, laid out flat on a leaf of pale animal skin. There is a single plant on the page, drawn large enough to fill it nearly from edge to edge. Spray of leaves at the top, a stem running down the middle of the page, and at the bottom, a tangle of roots spreading sideways into the open space, painted in soft greens and dull blues and the faded ochre of old earth. And all around the plant, filling the spaces the drawing leaves empty, curling along the top of the page, wrapping down beside the stem, gathering in a little block beneath the leaves, runs the strange flowing writing, the small looping letters that no one can read, the plant and its words. And there is nothing here you must do with it tonight. You need not name the plant, nor read the words, nor solve anything at all. You may simply look, the way you would look at a flower pressed long ago in the back of a book by someone you never met, and let your eyes wander over its quiet greens, and let yourself begin to drift gently down towards sleep. This is the largest part of the whole strange book, the part the scholars call the herbal or the botanical section, and it is where most people begin, because it is where the manuscript itself begins. Page after page after page of plants, more than 100 of them, well over 100 drawings by most careful counts, each one given its own page or very nearly so, each one a single plant standing alone in the middle of the leaf with the unreadable writing crowded around it. It is by far the biggest section of the manuscript, larger than all the strange bathing women, encircling stars, and little jars that come later in the book. If the Voynich Manuscript is a country, then this long, quiet procession of painted plants is most of its land. And the form of it is not strange at all. That is the first thing worth knowing, and it is a soothing thing to know. A book of plants laid out exactly this way, one plant to a page, drawn large, with a paragraph or two of text describing it, was one of the most ordinary kinds of book a person could own in medieval Europe. They were called herbals, and they were everywhere, in the libraries of monasteries and physicians and apothecaries and curious wealthy households. An herbal was a practical book, a reference book, the way a field guide is to us now. It told you what the plants looked like so you could find them, and what they were good for, and how to prepare them. This root boiled for a fever, these leaves crushed for a wound, this flower steeped to help a person sleep. The whole tradition reached back to the ancients, to Greek and Roman writings on medicine that were copied and recopied across 1,000 years. So a person of that age, opening the Voynich Manuscript to its plant pages, would have felt instantly at home. They would have thought, an herbal, a book of useful plants, I know what this is. The shape of the thing is comforting, familiar, exactly what it ought to be. It is worth picturing for a moment the real herbals beside which this one would have sat, for they are the company it was made to keep, and knowing them makes the strangeness of the Voynich plants stand out all the more gently. There were famous ones, copied and treasured across the medieval world. There was a book called the Tractatus de Herbis, a treatise of herbs, with hundreds of plants painted plainly and recognizably, each beside its names in several tongues so that a traveling physician could match the word to the leaf. There were the long line of books descended from an ancient Greek physician named Dioscorides, whose great work on medicine plants had been copied for more than 1,000 years. In all of these, the plants are real plants. You can look at them today and name most of them. There is the rose, there the violet, there the iris and the mandrake and the fern, because the people who drew them, or the people far back at the head of the long copying chain, had actually seen the living plants and meant to record them truly, so that a reader could go out into the field and find the very thing on the page. That was the whole point of an herbal, to connect the picture to the living world, so that knowledge could pass from one healer to the next. And the Voynich Manuscript wears all the outward dress of exactly such a book, the single plant per page, the descriptive text, the careful botanical pose with root and stem and leaf and flower all shown at once, and then quietly fails to do the one thing the dress promises. It does not connect to the living world at all. It is only when you look closely at the plants themselves that the comfort begins, very softly, to come undone. Because the plants are wrong, not wrong in a jarring way, not wrong like a nightmare, wrong in the quiet, dreamlike way of things that almost make sense and then do not. You look at one of these plants and your eye tells you at first glance, yes, that is a plant, of course it is. There are the leaves and there is the stem and there are the roots. And then you keep looking and something will not settle. The leaves belong to one kind of plant and the roots to another and the flower to a third, all fastened together onto the single stem as though someone had taken pieces of several different plants from several different gardens and assembled them into one. The leaves might be broad and lobed, the sort you would see on a vine, while the root below is a fat knotted bulb that no such vine ever grew, and the flower at the top is a little blue star or a small red trumpet that belongs to neither. It is a plant built out of parts, a composite, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it, and the whole garden quietly changes character before your eyes, for if you go from page to page, you find it again and again. Leaves that do not match their roots, flowers that match nothing at all, plants assembled rather than observed. Look too at how the drawings are made, for the craft of them is gentle to dwell on. The outlines come first in a faint brown ink, the same ink that wrote the words, a confident unbroken line, drawn freehand, that traces the whole plant in a single sure pass without much fussing or correction. And then over those brown outlines the color was laid, washes of paint brushed in afterward, not always tidily, sometimes running a little past the line or pooling where the brush lingered, the way a child colors just slightly outside the edges of a picture. The colors are few and modest, greens for the leaves, soft browns and tans for the roots and stems, dusty blues and faded reds and yellows for the flowers, made from plain inexpensive pigments. Nothing gilded, nothing precious, the working colors of someone who meant to fill a great many pages and could not afford to make each one a jewel. The pages themselves are not large, a little taller and narrower than a sheet of ordinary paper, and a few of them here and there through the herbal fold out, opening into wide panels 2 or 3 times the width of the others, as though a single plant had grown too sprawling to be contained and needed the page itself to stretch and make room. Unfold one of those gently in your mind's eye, and the plant spreads its strange limbs across the widened leaf, roots reaching, leaves fanning, with a small writing flowing into every gap. It is all quietly handmade, quietly imperfect, quietly the work of human hands across long hours, and that too is restful to know, for there is nothing cold or mechanical in it, only the patient labor of someone bent over these leaves a very long time ago. The roots are often the strangest part and the loveliest, and you may let your eye rest on them as you grow heavy. Whoever drew these plants seems to have loved the roots especially and dwelt on them and let imagination run their most freely. Some roots spread out beneath the plant like the tangled legs of some small creature. Some coil and braid together like rope. Some swell into rounded knobs and bulbs, soft as little potatoes. And some, this is the part that has caught so many eyes over the years, some of the roots seem to take on shapes that are almost not quite, but almost like something living. A root that branches like a pair of legs, a root with a curve to it like a sleeping animal. A few that, if you squint and let your mind wander, look faintly like dragons or like little faces. None of it is obvious, none of it shouts. It is all soft and ambiguous and dreamlike, the way shapes are dreamlike in the embers of a dying fire or in the clouds of a summer afternoon, where you can find a face if you go looking and lose it again the moment you blink. And the flowers are impossible in the gentlest way. They bloom in colors that real flowers wear, the blues and reds and yellows and soft browns of the cheap good paints the artist had to hand, pigments like the blue of azurite ground from stone and the warm ochre of iron-rich earth. But the shapes the flowers take belong to no garden on earth, petals arranged in patterns that no living blossom arranges them in, little starbursts and rosettes and trumpets and crowns. Flowers that seem to spiral, flowers with too many parts or too few, flowers that look less like things that grew and more like things that were dreamed. If you walked through every meadow and forest and mountainside in the world with this book in your hands, and held each painted plant up against the living world to find its match, you would walk a very long way and come home, in the end, with almost nothing. Because the plants of the Voynich Manuscript, for the most part, do not exist. They match nothing that grows. Of the more than 100 plants drawn so carefully across these pages, only a tiny handful can be linked, even tentatively, even hopefully, to any real plant, and even those few links are arguments, not certainties, things that one scholar sees and another does not. There are exceptions, a precious few, and they are worth dwelling on softly because they are the small islands of the familiar in a wide, strange sea. Among the more than 100 plants, a small handful seem genuinely to show a real one. There is a drawing that looks, to most who study it, very much like a wild pansy, the little heartsease flower of European meadows, its petals arranged just so, recognizable across 6 centuries. There is another that resembles a maidenhair fern, with its fine, delicate fronds, drawn closely enough that the eye relaxes and says, "Yes, I know you." A few others draw close to plausible, something that might be a fern, something that might be a familiar garden herb. But these are the rare ones, the 2 or 3 or 4 out of more than 100 that let the modern eye rest. They are the proof, in a way, that whoever made this book could draw a real plant when they wished to. Which only deepens the puzzle of all the others, for if the hand could render a true pansy, why did it fill page after page with flowers that grow in no field on earth? Let that settle for a moment softly, because it is a strange and beautiful fact. Here is a book shaped exactly like a practical guide to real plants, a working herbal, the kind a healer would actually use, and the plants inside it are, almost every one of them, plants that no one has ever found. It is a field guide to a country that does not appear on any map, a garden that grows nowhere. An impossible garden, painted with great care and patience by a hand that clearly knew how an herbal was supposed to look, and filled it with a flora that the world has never seen. And there is a further small strangeness, a quiet echo running through the book that you may let drift across your mind without holding too tightly to it. Far later in the manuscript, past the plants and the stars and the bathing figures, there comes a smaller section that scholars call the pharmaceutical part, pages crowded not with whole plants, but with little drawings of roots and leaves, sketched small, set in neat rows beside what looked like rows of jars and vessels, the kind of thing an apothecary's shelf might hold. And some of those small sketched plant parts are the very same plants from the great herbal pages, drawn again, smaller and plainer, as though the book is quoting itself, cross-referencing its own impossible flora from one section to another. A made-up garden that keeps its own index. Whoever built this book built it with care, with system, with the patient internal logic of a real reference work and turned all that care toward plants that were never real. That, perhaps more than anything, is what makes the herbal pages so hard to dismiss as idle scribbling. There is too much order in them, too much intention. The garden was tended. People have tried, of course, to find the real plants behind the painted ones. Of course they have. It is the most natural thing in the world to do, to take this odd green book and walk it out into the daylight and start matching. And every so often, over the long years, someone has held up one of these drawings and said, "There, that one, I know that one." The earliest such claim that anyone remembers came in 1944 from a respected American botanist named Hugh O'Neill, who looked at the plant pages and announced that he saw among them a sunflower and another that looked to him like a capsicum, a pepper. This was a thrilling thing to say if it were true, because sunflowers and peppers are plants of the Americas. They did not exist in Europe until after Columbus sailed west and the two worlds met. And the parchment of the Voynich Manuscript, as we have already seen on earlier pages tonight, was made from animals that lived in the early 1400s, decades before any European had ever seen a sunflower. So if there truly were a sunflower in the book, the whole story would have to be rewritten. But O'Neill's claim was a brief thing, only a few hundred words, more a glance than a study, and most who have looked since have not been able to see the sunflower he saw. The drawing he pointed to could be a sunflower if you wish it to be, or it could be a great many other things, or nothing at all. It is a round flower with petals around it, and the eye, wishing for a sunflower, supplies one. That wishing is the heart of the whole problem, and it is worth holding gently as you drift, because it tells you something true about how minds work in the dark. When you have more than 100 fanciful plants, assembled from imaginary parts, and you go looking through them for resemblances to real ones, you are almost certain to find some. Not because the artist drew real plants, but because there are only so many shapes a leaf can take, only so many ways a flower can be round or a root can fork, and chance alone will hand you a few that look familiar. A later pair of researchers, decades after O'Neill, went much further down the same road. They studied the plants closely and declared that dozens of them matched plants of the New World, of Mexico in particular, and they pointed to a real Aztec herbal, a beautiful 16th century book of Mexican plants, and laid the two side by side and found echoes. For a little while this made a stir. But the careful answer that came back from those who know the manuscript best was the same gentle caution. Any large enough collection of made-up plants will, by sheer chance, contain a handful that resemble real ones, and resemblance is not the same as proof. A drawing that looks a little like a Mexican plant, and a little like a European one, and a little like nothing, is not really a drawing of any of them. It is its own thing. It belongs to the impossible garden. There is a kindlier explanation for the strangeness too, one that has nothing to do with secrets or codes or hidden continents, and it is worth knowing because it is so very human, and it may help you let the whole puzzle go and sink toward rest. It is this, that medieval herbals were copied by hand over and over for centuries, one scribe copying from another who had copied from another, all the way back along a chain that stretched 1,000 years into the past. And every time a drawing of a plant was copied by a hand that had never actually seen that plant, a monk in a cold room copying a picture of a flower that grew only in some distant country, working only from the picture in front of him and not from life, the drawing drifted a little. A leaf got rounder, a root sprouted a curl that was not there before, a flower lost a few petals and gained a few. Copy a copy of a copy of a copy enough times, across enough lonely rooms and enough hundreds of years, and the plant slowly transforms into something that no longer resembles anything real at all, a beautiful accumulated error, a flower of pure tradition, drawn from drawings until the living thing at the root of it all is utterly lost. By this gentle theory, the impossible plants of the Voynich Manuscript are not inventions and not lies. They are the far end of a very long game of telling, the last whisper in a chain of whispers 600 years long, where the original word has been worn away to something soft and strange and lovely, and no longer quite means what it once meant. No one knows if that is the answer. It may be that, or it may be that the plants are coded somehow, each one standing for something other than itself, or it may be that they were dreamed up whole by someone who simply liked the look of an herbal, and filled one with imaginary flora the way a child might draw a bestiary of made-up animals. It may be all of these in different measures across different pages. The honest truth, the one that lets you rest, is that the garden keeps its own counsel just as the writing does, and has done so patiently for 600 years, and is in no hurry now. So let the pages turn slowly, one after another, in the warm and quiet light. A plant with broad green leaves and a root like a sleeping thing and its words around it. A plant with a little blue star of a flower that grows nowhere and its words around it. A plant whose roots fork and tangle and reach sideways across the page, soft brown on pale skin and its words around it. Page after page after page, more than 100 of them, a whole long flowering country drawn by a careful, patient hand and painted in the modest colors of stone and earth, every plant standing alone and serene in the middle of its leaf, asking nothing, explaining nothing, simply being looked at. You can walk through this garden the way you would walk through a real one at the close of a long, warm day, not naming the flowers, not gathering them, not needing to know their uses, only letting your eyes pass over them, green and blue and ochre and soft red, and feeling the quiet of the place settle into you. There is something restful in a garden that cannot be solved. A real herbal asks things of you. Learn this, remember that, this root for fever and these leaves for pain. But this garden asks nothing, because its uses are sealed away in a language no one reads, and its plants grow in no field you could ever visit, and so there is nothing here to study and nothing to carry away. It is the most peaceful kind of garden there is, a garden purely to be wandered, with no gate at the far end and no task at its center, where the impossible flowers bloom in their impossible colors and the strange roots sleep beneath them, and the unreadable words keep their soft watch all around, exactly as they have through 600 turning years. Let your breath go long and slow, the way you would breathe walking down a shaded garden path with nowhere you need to be. Let the plant on the page blur gently as your eyes grow heavy, the leaves softening, the colors running together, the small looping words dissolving into a quiet murmur at the edges of the leaf. The garden does not need you awake. It has bloomed in the dark of its closed book for centuries with no one watching, and it will go on blooming there whether you wake again to see it or not, page after impossible page, green and patient and entirely calm. There is nothing to identify, there is nothing to find. The flowers that grow nowhere are growing still, soft and silent on their old pale leaves, and you may leave them to it and rest and drift down past them now, the way one drifts past the last quiet beds of a garden at nightfall, slowly and easily, and with no wish at all to turn back down and softly down into sleep. A single page lies open under lamplight, and on it a great circle is unfolding, not turning exactly, for the page does not move, but seeming to turn, the way a wheel seems to turn when you stare at the spokes of it long enough. The vellum is the soft color of old cream, and across it someone has drawn ring within ring within ring, concentric circles nested one inside the next like the rippling that spreads from a stone dropped into still water, frozen at the moment of its widest reach. In the very center of all those rings there is a face, a small round face drawn in faded brown ink with 2 dots for eyes and a curving line for a mouth, and around it a crown of wavy rays reaching outward, a sun, or a thing that means the sun, gazing up out of the heart of the wheel at whoever leans close to look, and set into the bands around it, scattered along the rings like seeds pressed into the rim of a wheel, are stars. Small stars drawn by hand, each one a little splash of points with a tiny tail or stem, and beside each star a word in a script no one alive can read. There is nothing here you need to understand. Let the wheel turn slowly in your mind and let yourself drift down gently towards sleep. These are the astronomical pages of the Voynich Manuscript, and after the long green hours of the herbal section, after all those impossible plants with their coiling roots, the book changes its mind entirely and turns its attention upward, away from the soil and toward the sky. The change is abrupt and a little wonderful, the way it can be wonderful, walking out of a dim wood, to come suddenly upon open ground and see the whole sky waiting overhead. For perhaps a dozen leaves of vellum the plants vanish and the circles begin, page after page of them, wheels and rings and discs, suns and moons and crowded fields of little stars, and the eye, which had grown used to leaves and stems, must learn a new grammar entirely. The scholars, in their careful way, have given this stretch of the book a careful name. They call it the astronomical section, and sometimes the cosmological section, drawing a soft line somewhere around the 67th leaf, and following it to perhaps the 73rd, and then on again to a few stranger pages near the 85th and 86th, where the circles grow vast and begin to do things no ordinary diagram has ever done. We will visit all of it slowly, in no hurry at all, the way you might wander through a hall hung with old star charts on a quiet afternoon, pausing at each one only as long as it pleases you. Begin with the simplest of them, the round diagrams with a face at the center. There are a good many of these, and they fall into two soft families. In some, the face at the heart of the wheel is a sun, round, rayed, faintly smiling, with that crown of wavy spokes reaching out toward the first ring. In others, the face is a moon, a crescent moon, most often drawn as a thin curved sliver with a small profile tucked into its hollow, a cheek and a nose and a closed or half-closed eye, the moon shown as a sleeping or dreaming face rather than a blank stone. Some of these moons are full discs with a face looking straight out, and some are the slender crescents, but they all have that same quality of a face caught in repose, gentle and a little drowsy, as though the moon itself were already half asleep on the page. And around these faces, sun faces and moon faces alike, the maker drew his rings, and into the rings he set his stars. There is one disc among them that has caused a great deal of quiet excitement over the years, and it is worth pausing on, because it is the kind of thing that lets a person see almost anything they wish to see. On one page, the maker drew a circular shape that is not a clean ring but something stranger, an irregular lobed form with curved arms sweeping out from a center, spiraling like a pinwheel or a whirlpool drawn small. Early in the last century, a scholar of the manuscript looked at that little spiral of curving arms and announced that it was a spiral galaxy, a far-off island of stars seen as we now know it can only be seen, through the lens of a powerful telescope, which would have made the book a thing of impossible foresight, centuries ahead of any instrument that could have shown such a sight. It was a thrilling idea and entirely wrong, and that is itself a useful lesson about these pages. The curved arms are almost certainly nothing of the kind. They are the kind of swirling decorative form that medieval artists drew all the time, a rosette, a flourish, a stylized whirl of cloud or water or pure ornament. But the episode tells you how these circles work upon the mind. They are vague enough and strange enough and old enough that a hopeful eye can find almost any future folded into them, and the manuscript, which says nothing, neither confirms the dream nor denies it. It simply holds its swirling shape under the lamp and lets you bring to it whatever you came carrying. The stars are the thing you keep returning to on these pages. They are small and they are everywhere, and they are drawn with a particular charm that no amount of mystery can spoil. Each one is a little burst of points, sometimes 5 points, sometimes 6 or 7, not regular, not ruled with any instrument, just drawn freehand the way a child draws a star, with a small round body and a stubby stem like the stem of an apple or a cherry, so that the stars look less like distant suns and more like tiny flowers, or like fruit hanging on an invisible branch. They are dotted along the rings, spaced out around the wheels, gathered in loose constellations across the open spaces of the page. And beside very nearly every one of them, written small and neat, is a word, a label, a name you would think written in that flowing, unreadable script, as though the maker were going through the heavens star by star and setting down for each one what it was called. You cannot read a single one of those names. They are written in the same script as all the rest of the book, the looping letters that have defeated every codebreaker who has ever bent over them. And so the stars are named, and the names tell us nothing. And there is a strange tenderness in that, a whole sky carefully labeled in a language that died, if it ever lived, before it could be passed on. On one of these pages, low in a corner, the maker drew a little cluster of 7 small stars huddled close together, tighter than the rest, set slightly apart from the scattered fields around them. 7 stars drawn close. And here, for once, something in the Voynich speaks a word we can almost understand, because 7 small stars huddled together is how people have drawn the Pleiades for thousands of years. That little misty knot of stars in the shoulder of the bull that every sky-watching people on Earth has noticed and named, the 7 sisters, the cluster, the little smudge of light that the eye can find but never quite resolve. If those 7 crowded stars are the Pleiades, and many who study the book believe they are, then for one small moment the manuscript reaches across all its strangeness and touches the ordinary night sky that hangs over every roof in the world. We do not know, we never quite know with this book, but the 7 stars are there, drawn close, and you may let them be the Pleiades for tonight if you like, that gentle smudge that has watched over sleeping people since long before there were any books at all. Now the circles grow more elaborate, and we come to the part of the section that is, by a wide margin, the most recognizable thing in the whole manuscript, the part where, for the first time, the book shows us pictures we have seen before. These are the zodiac pages, and they are built as great wheels, each one a set of concentric rings with an emblem set proudly in the center, and the emblems are old friends. A fish, 2 fish in fact, the paired fish of Pisces. A bull, heavy-shouldered and horned, the bull of Taurus. A scorpion with its curling tail. A lion, a goat, a creature with a drawn weapon. The signs of the zodiac, the 12 old houses of the sky through which the sun walks across the turning year, drawn here in faded ink and color, just as they were drawn in calendars and prayer books and astrologers' charts all across medieval Europe. After so many pages of plants that grow nowhere and stars with unreadable names, it is a quiet relief to meet the zodiac, to find the book speaking, for a moment, a language the rest of the world also spoke. And the maker in his way was being faithful to that language, for the zodiac he drew is the same zodiac the whole Western world had carried in its head for 2,000 years and more. The fish, the ram, the bull, the twins, the crab, the lion, the maiden, the scales, the scorpion, the archer, the goat, the water-bearer, 12 signs strung along the band of sky through which the sun appears to travel as the earth carries us around it. One sign roughly to a month, the great slow clock of the year written in stars. The Babylonians knew most of them. The Greeks named them and the Romans carried the names west, and by the 1400s, when the Voynich was made, the 12 signs were everywhere a person looked, carved over church doors, painted into the borders of prayer books, set out in the calendars that told a farmer when to plow, and a physician when it was safe to let blood. So when you meet the bull and the scorpion and the Voynich, you are meeting figures with a long and unbroken pedigree, drawn by a hand that knew them as well as you know the days of the week. That is the comfort of these pages, and it makes the small wrongnesses that follow all the more curious. And yet look a little closer, and even here the Voynich will not behave. For the zodiac in this book does what no proper medieval zodiac does, it begins in the wrong place. Every calendar of that age began its circle of signs with Aries, the ram, the sign of the spring equinox, the natural starting point of the astrological year. But the Voynich zodiac, as the pages survive, opens not with Aries but with Pisces, the fish, and runs on from there. It is a small thing and a very strange one, the kind of small wrongness that makes the scholars frown and reach for explanations. Perhaps the first leaves were lost, perhaps the maker followed some calendar that began the year in a different month, perhaps it means nothing at all. And there is another oddity stitched in beside it. Two of the signs, Aries and Taurus, the ram and the bull, each appear not once but twice, drawn over 2 pages apiece, as though split in half. Where a single wheel might hold 30 little attendant figures, these doubled signs hold 15 each. The one ring of 30 opened out into 2 rings of 15, light half and dark half, the first part of the month and the second. Astrologers of that time did sometimes divide each sign into 2 parts of about 15 days, and that may be all this is, the maker simply being third, giving each half of the spring its own wheel, or it may be something else. With this book it is always either the simplest thing or something no one has guessed yet, and we are rarely allowed to know which. But it is the rings themselves, around those central emblems, that hold the strangest and most beautiful detail of the zodiac pages, and it is worth slowing right down here, because there is a great deal to rest your eyes upon. Around each sign in the bands that circle it, the maker drew people. Small human figures, 30 of them to a full sign, ringed around the emblem like numbers around the face of a clock, or like dancers standing in a great circle holding hands. Most of them are women, or at least are drawn as women, soft-bodied and bare or lightly draped, and each one stands in her own little place in the ring, turned slightly toward the next, so that the whole circle of them seems caught in some slow and patient procession around the sign at its heart. And here is the detail that everyone remembers once they have seen it. The small gesture repeated 30 times around each wheel and 12 times around the book. Every one of these little figures is holding a star. Each woman in the ring reaches out, or up, or to the side, and in her hand, on the end of a slender line like a thread or a stem, she holds one of those small hand-drawn stars. A whole circle of figures, each one tethered to her own single star, holding it out the way you might hold out a flower, or a lantern, or a child's balloon on its string. No one knows what they mean, these star-holding women, and no one ever has. But it is hard to look at them and not feel something settle quietly into place. Some old half-remembered idea about the stars belonging to people, or people belonging to the stars. The notion as old as stargazing itself that each soul has its star somewhere overhead, lit at birth and put out at death, and that the heavens are not empty but peopled, crowded with the small bright fires of every life that has been or will be. Whether the maker of the Voynich meant any such thing, we cannot say. He left us only the picture, the ring of patient figures, each cupping her star on its thin thread, circling forever around the fish, the bull, the scorpion, the goat, and the picture is enough. You do not need to know its meaning to feel its quiet. 30 little keepers of 30 little stars going round and round and round, the way the real stars go round the pole all through the dark while you sleep. Some of the figures stand in tubs. This is one of those details that sounds like an invention and is not in the wheels of Aries and Taurus. A number of the little women are shown not standing in the open ring but seated or standing in small barrel-shaped vessels, cylindrical containers like wooden tubs or buckets, holding their stars all the while. What the tubs are for, no one knows. They will come back, these vessels of bathing women, in a later part of the book, where the figures wade through green pools and winding channels of water. And some who study the manuscript think the tubs of the zodiac are first quiet rhyme with those pools to come, an early note of a theme the book will return to. For now they are only one more gentle strangeness, a woman, a star on a thread, a little tub, set into a ring around a horned bull on a page some 600 years old. Let it be strange. It costs you nothing to let it be strange. And the maker was a person of his own time and place, which shows through in small human ways once you start to notice. The archer of Sagittarius, who in older charts draws a simple bow, here holds a crossbow, a mechanical, cranked, distinctly late medieval European crossbow, the weapon of a 15th century crossbowman, not of an ancient centaur. He wears a cap, this archer, a soft, pointed cap of the kind worn in the German lands of that age. And he is, of all the central figures in the zodiac, the only one drawn as a fully clothed standing man, taking careful aim across the wheel, and the scholars have noticed that he is aiming at one particular star-holding figure in the ring, the only one of all the little women who holds her star low, down by her side, instead of up and out. He is aiming, it seems, at her. What that might mean is anyone's guess, and many have guessed, but the crossbow and the cap do one useful thing for us, plainly and without mystery. They place the hand that drew this book firmly in a particular world, the world of Central Europe in the first half of the 1400s, a world of crossbows and pointed caps and laced 15th century clothes, the same world the radiocarbon dating of the vellum points to. The book may be unreadable, but it is not unmoored. It was made by someone somewhere at a knowable time who knew what a crossbow looked like and what people wore. There is a gap in the zodiac too, a small absence worth knowing as you drift. Two of the signs are simply missing. Capricorn the goat and Aquarius the water bearer are nowhere in the surviving pages. But the gap is not a true mystery, only a sad and ordinary one, because exactly at the place where those two signs should fall, a whole leaf of the manuscript is gone. A page lost somewhere across the centuries of the book's long wandering life, torn or fallen or cut away, carrying its two zodiac wheels with it into wherever lost pages go. So we have 10 of the 12 signs and 2 empty places in the year and a missing leaf to account for them. The heavens of the Voynich are not quite complete. There is a hole in the sky where the goat and the water bearer used to be, and it is only the same hole that time wears in everything, given long enough. And then near the back of this part of the book, the circles do something they have not done before. They grow enormous. On a few leaves, the maker folded the vellum out sheets larger than the rest of the book that open up and out, and in one astonishing case up and down as well, unfolding into a single grate spread far bigger than any ordinary page. And across this widest of all the manuscript's surfaces, he drew the strangest diagram in the whole strange book, the great rosette page. Picture it opening out beneath the lamp, fold after fold, until a vast sheet lies spread before you, and across it 9 large circles arranged in a loose 3x3 pattern, a central rosette and 8 more around it, all joined to one another by curving causeways and bands, like islands linked by bridges, or cells joined by channels, or worlds strung together along threads of light. Each of the 9 circles is itself a small world of detail, and the detail is extraordinary. There are buildings inside them. There are towers and walls and what look for all the world like little castles, drawn with battlements and roofs, including one famous structure with high crenellated walls and slender towers, tipped with the swallow-tailed battlements of a particular kind of northern Italian fortress. There are things that may be a volcano, or a spring, or the sun rising over the rim of a circle. There are stars scattered across the connecting bands, in tiny shapes that might be pipes or roots or rays joining one world to the next. In the corners, where the great folded sheet comes to its edges, 4 smaller forms sit like seals or suns marking the quarters. What is it? No one knows. Of course no one knows. By now you expect nothing else, but the guesses are some of the most beautiful in the whole long history of guessing about this book. Some look at the 9 joined circles and see a map, a strange aerial map of cities and the roads between them, a whole imagined or remembered country scene from far above. Some see a cosmology, a model of the heavens and the earth and the spheres between, the 9 circles as 9 worlds or 9 realms or 9 levels of creation, joined by the channels along which divine influence is supposed to flow. Some have reached for the old Jewish mysticism of the Kabbalah with its tree of linked spheres, though that tree has 10 spheres and this diagram has 9, and so the match slips just as every match with this book always slips, close enough to tempt and never close enough to hold. And some more quietly suggest that it need not be a map of anywhere real or any heaven believed in, that it may be exactly what it appears to be and nothing more, beautiful invented cosmos, a private universe of 9 bright islands and the shining roads between them, dreamed up and drawn out by a hand that wanted, for whatever reason, to give shape to a world that does not exist. Of all the pages in the book, this is the one that feels most like a place you could almost live in. You could almost set out from the central rosette along one of the curving causeways and travel to the castle with the swallow-tailed walls, and from there to the next bright circle, and the next, a slow pilgrimage across a cosmos that was finished and sealed inside its folded sheet 6 centuries ago, and has been waiting, folded in the dark of the binding, ever since. So let the great sheet lie open a while longer under the lamp, and let your eye wander it the way it wanders a window full of stars, without trying to read it, without needing it to meet. The 9 circles glow softly in their faded inks, the little castles keep their gates, the causeways run from world to world. And all through the pages behind it, the wheels go on turning that do not turn, the sun faces smiling out of their rings, the drowsy crescent moons with their closed eyes, the fields of small stem stars scattered like fruit across the vellum, the great patient circle of women each holding her single star out on its thread, going round and round and round the fish and the bull and the crossbow archer in his pointed cap. None of it can be read, all of it can be looked at. And there is a deep and particular rest in that, in a sky you are not asked to understand, only to gaze up into, the way you gazed up as a child before you knew the names of anything, when the stars were simply there, simply bright, simply far, and asked nothing of you but that you lie still beneath them and let them shine. There is nothing on these pages to keep you awake. The names of the stars are sealed away in a script that gives up nothing, and so there is no fact here to chase, no puzzle that wants solving tonight, no door these circles are asking you to open. They have turned without turning for 600 years, and they will go on turning whether you watch them or not, so let them turn. Let the sun smile and the moon sleep, and the little star keepers carry their bright threads round the wheel. Let the 9 circles glow and the causeways run on into the dark. Let the whole quiet cosmos of the Voynich fold itself softly closed and sink down with you, ring within ring within ring, like ripples settling back to stillness on the surface of a pond at the end of the day, down and gently down into sleep. Let your eye rest for a moment on a single page of green water. The parchment beneath it has gone the soft tea brown of 600 years, but the water on it is still green, a pale, watery mineral green, the color of a pond seen through shallow ice, or of light coming up through a glass of something herbal. And it is not a still page, it moves or seems to. Across the whole spread of the parchment, the green runs in long looping channels, pooling here into a wide basin, narrowing there into a pipe no wider than a finger, curling around the edge of the leaf and back again, the way water finds its own way downhill across a meadow. And everywhere in the water, small and pale and entirely at their ease, there are people, dozens of them. Tiny human figures, no taller than your thumbnail, standing in the pools up to their waists, sitting along the rims of the basins with their feet in the current, drifting single file down the narrow channels, as if the water were carrying them somewhere gently, in no hurry at all. This is one of the strangest and most tender pages in the whole of the Voynich Manuscript, and we are going to spend this quiet hour inside it, drifting along its green channels the way the little figures do, looking carefully and without alarm at what someone drew here, a very long time ago, for reasons that no one alive has ever been able to name. The figures are mostly women, that much the scholars agree on, and it is one of the very few things about this section that nearly everyone agrees on. They are drawn simply, almost like the figures a child might draw, a rounded body, a small head, a suggestion of hair, limbs sketched in a few confident lines. They are nude, most of them, in the plain, unembarrassed way of medieval medical drawing, the way bodies were shown in the herbals and the doctor's manuals of that age, when the point was the body itself and not anything secret about it. There is nothing leering here, nothing meant to provoke. The little figures stand in their green water with the calm of bathers at a familiar spring, and the overall feeling of the page, once your eye settles into it, is not strange at all but oddly companionable. A a great many small people all together, all soaking quietly in the same warm green element, going about some shared and gentle business that the page does not explain. It helps, before we go any deeper into the water, to know just how old all of this is and how few firm facts we actually hold. The manuscript that contains these bathing pages lives now in a library at Yale University in Connecticut, far from wherever it was made, cataloged under a quiet number and kept in careful, climate-controlled dark. It is not a large book, a little over 9 inches tall and some 6 inches across, a few hundred pages of vellum, that fine pale writing skin prepared from calf or sheep, bound up into a volume slim enough to hold comfortably in 2 hands, and it is genuinely old. When modern scientists took tiny samples of the vellum and measured the slow decay of the carbon within them, the calf skin returned a date in the early 1400s, somewhere in the span between roughly 1404 and 1438. The inks and pigments, examined separately, proved entirely consistent with that age, the ordinary iron gall ink and mineral colors of a 15th century hand. So the page of green water you are resting your eye on was painted while the Middle Ages were still drawing toward their close, before Columbus crossed the Atlantic, before the printing press had spread its first books across Europe. Whoever drew the little bathers has been gone for 5 or 6 centuries and took the meaning of the page with them into the dark. Scholars have given this part of the manuscript 2 names, and both names are worth knowing because each one carries a different guess about what the page is for. The plainer name is the biological section, biological because the figures are human bodies, and because something about the looping channels and the way the water seems to flow from pool to pool reminded early students of the inside of a body, of veins and vessels, and the slow circulation of fluids beneath the skin. The other name, the one many researchers now prefer, is the balneological section. Balneology is an old and gentle word. It means the study of baths, the science of bathing for health, of warm springs and mineral waters and the curing properties of soaking in them. To call this the balneological section is to say, these are people taking the waters. These are bathers at a medieval spa, and the green pools are healing pools, and the whole busy page is a kind of illustrated handbook of bathing for the body's good. Neither name has ever been proven. They are both guesses, careful and reasonable guesses, hung like little signs over a door that no one has ever managed to open. But you can let them sit side by side as you drift, the body in the bath, the vein in the spring, and feel how the same gentle picture can be read 2 such different ways. Let us go back to the page itself, because the page rewards slow looking, and there is nowhere you need to be. The water, as I said, is green, and the greenness matters more than you might think. Across the manuscript, its unknown maker used a small handful of colors, laid down in thin washes with what the experts believe were ordinary mineral pigments of the early 15th century, the same earths and ores that any painter or apothecary of that time would have had to hand. There are pale blues elsewhere in these pages, and faded reds, and a soft brown, but here in the bathing pages the green dominates, pooling thickly in the basins and running pale and thin through the channels. Some scholars have pointed out that green was a color medieval illustrators reached for when they wanted to show medicinal or mineral water, the kind of water that comes up from the ground already carrying the taste and the virtue of the rock it passed through. So the green is not decoration only. It may be a clue, it may be the painter's quiet way of telling you that this is not ordinary bath water drawn from a well, but special water, charged water, water that does something to the people soaking in it. And those people, let us look at them more closely now, the way you might lean in over an old illustration by candlelight, careful not to tire your eyes. They are doing many small different things, and the variety of it is part of the page's strange charm. Some of them simply stand in the pools, the water at their waists, their arms loose at their sides, faces turned outward as though they were waiting patiently for something. Others sit along the edges of the basins with their legs in the water, the way you would sit at the side of a pool on a summer afternoon. Some appear to be moving through the channels in single file, one behind another, drifting down the pale green ducts that link one basin to the next, so that the eye is led along with them from pool to pool, around the curling course of the water. A few of the figures hold small objects in their hands, a ring, a cross, a flower, a little vessel or jar, things whose meaning is entirely lost to us but which the painter clearly thought worth including. Here and there a figure wears a crown, a tiny circlet on a small round head, lifting that one bather above the others in some way we cannot read. They are not frightened, these little people. They are not in distress. The whole crowded scene has the unhurried, faintly social air of a public bath on a slow day, people soaking, people waiting, people passing quietly from one warm pool to the next. But the strangest thing on the page is not the bathers, it is what connects them. Because the pools are not separate basins sitting independently on the parchment, the way baths would sit in a real bathhouse. They are joined by an elaborate, looping, almost obsessive network of pipes and tubes and channels that runs all over the leaf, linking every pool to every other pool, carrying the green water around and through the whole composition in a single connected system. The tubes branch and rejoin. They swell into bulbs and narrow into necks. They curl back on themselves in tight spirals. They cross over and under one another. They sprout little side channels that feed smaller basins tucked into the corners of the page. In places, the plumbing grows so dense and so intricate that the figures seem almost caught inside it, standing within the very pipes, as though the water and the conduits and the people had all grown together into one living, fluid machine. It does not look like any bathhouse that was ever actually built. It looks, depending on the hour and the mood in which you study it, like two quite different things at once, and this is the heart of the puzzle, the fork in the road that no one has ever managed to walk past. Look at the plumbing one way, and it looks like exactly that, plumbing. An engineer's fantasy of waterworks, a system of pipes and cisterns and conduits for moving healing water from spring to bath and bath to bath, the kind of marvelous hydraulic apparatus that a 15th century mind might dream up if it were imagining the grandest spa that could ever exist. The channels carry the water, the bulbs and chambers store and warm it. The bathers move through the system stage by stage, taking each bath in its turn, the way a patient at a real medieval spa might be prescribed a sequence of soakings, hotter and cooler, mineral and plain, over the course of a cure. Read this way, the whole page is engineering, the architecture of bathing, drawn out in loving and impossible detail. But look at the very same lines another way, and the pipes stop being plumbing and become something inward and bodily. The looping channels become veins and arteries. The pooling basins become organs, the chambers of a heart, the soft folds of a stomach or a womb. The green water becomes blood, or the other fluids the medieval doctors believed flowed through the human frame, the humors whose balance was thought to govern health and sickness, mood and temperament, the whole weather of a person's inner life. Read this way, the page is not a building at all but a body, a single body seen from the inside, its hidden rivers traced out, and its tiny inhabitants placed within it like the soul's many small servants, going about the secret housekeeping of being alive. And this reading has its own deep logic, because the people of that age genuinely did imagine the body as a kind of waterworks, a landscape of channels through which the four humors flowed, to be drained and balanced and coaxed back into health by exactly the kinds of baths and treatments the other reading describes. The two interpretations, you see, do not cancel each other out, they lean against each other. The bath treats the body is itself a kind of bath. The water outside the skin and the water within it are, in the medieval mind, parts of one continuous and circulating whole. Whoever drew this page may not have been confused between the two at all. They may have been drawing deliberately the place where the two become the same thing. It is worth pausing, too, on the sheer abundance of figures, because the crowding of the page is itself part of the puzzle. The rest of the manuscript is comparatively sparse with people. The herbal pages are all leaf and root and impossible blossom. The great star charts wheel through their circles with only a scattering of small attendants tucked among the rays. But here in the bathing choir, the human figure arrives all at once and in great numbers, page after page after page of them, until you begin to feel that whoever made this book had been saving the people up, holding them back through all the plants and all the stars, only to release them in a flood when the water finally came. There is a generosity to it, almost an exuberance, that sits oddly with the patient unreadable script all around. And the figures repeat in small variations, the same simple body, the same calm posture, drawn again and again in slightly different arrangements, the way a careful scribe might copy a diagram through its successive stages, or the way a single idea returns to a dreamer over and over, each time a little changed. Whether the repetition is medical, showing a treatment unfolding step by step, or symbolic, showing a process turning through its phases, or simply the habit of a hand drawing what it knew how to draw, no one can say. But the eye, drifting across so many gentle, near-identical bathers, settles into the rhythm of them the way it settles into the rhythm of waves, and that rhythm alone is enough to begin loosening you towards sleep. There is more here that scholars have noticed, and it is worth letting these details settle over you slowly, like sediment drifting down through still water. This whole section, the bathing pages, makes up one self-contained gathering of the manuscript, what bookbinders call a quire, a small bundle of folded leaves sewn together. In the Voynich Manuscript, it is the 13th quire, and one careful student of the book, a researcher who spent years cataloging its contents, called it simply the most unusual part of the entire manuscript, which, for a book as wholly unusual as this one, is no small thing to say. The bathing quire stands apart even from its strange neighbors. The herbal pages with their impossible plants, the astronomical pages with their circling stars, the great folding pages of interlocking circles, none of them is quite as crowded with human life, as busy and intimate and tender as this gathering of little bathers in their green water. And there is a quiet mystery folded inside the mystery, a small thing that has to do with the body of the book itself. Two of the leaves in this section, when you set them side by side, turn out to form a single picture, a bathing scene that runs straight across both pages, with the water flowing out of one leaf and on into the next, the channels lining up exactly so that the whole design becomes one. The maker drew it as a unity, meant it to be seen as a unity, water passing seamlessly from page to page. But in the manuscript as it survives today, those two leaves are no longer next to each other. At some point in the long life of the book, during one of its rebindings perhaps, when the loose gatherings were taken apart and sewn back together by hands that could no more read the pictures than we can, another leaf was slipped in between them, and the two halves of the picture were pulled apart. The water no longer flows across, the design no longer joins. To see it whole now, you must take the pages in your imagination and slide them back together, mending by an act of attention a join that was broken centuries ago by someone who simply did not know what they were looking at. It is a small thing. But there is something quietly moving in it, the idea that the book has been not only undeciphered but disarranged, its own internal logic scrambled by the well-meaning hands that tried to keep it safe, so that even the pictures, which we can at least see, have been shuffled out of the order their maker intended. So what were these bathing pages for? Here we come to the soft edge of the known, the place where the firm ground of what we can see gives way to the deeper water of what we can only guess. And the honest answer, the answer you can rest your whole weight on, is that nobody knows. But the guesses are gentle ones, and there is no harm in laying them out, one by one, like cards turned face up on a quiet table. The first guess is the simplest and perhaps the most likely, that these are medical pages, pages about bathing for health, drawn in the tradition of the medieval balneological treatises. Such books really did exist, and they were not rare. Across Italy and Germany and the Bohemian lands, all through the 14th and 15th centuries, learned physicians wrote and illustrated handbooks about the healing power of baths, which springs cured which ailments, how long to soak and in what order, how the warm waters could be used to treat diseases of the skin and the blood and the inner organs. One famous old work, a 13th century poem about the medicinal baths near Naples, was copied and illustrated again and again over the centuries, its pictures showing bathers gathered in stone pools beneath the open sky. Scholars studying the Voynich bathing pages have noticed how much they rhyme with this tradition, the pools, the gathered figures, the sense of a sequence of treatments. If that is what these pages are, then the green water is medicine, and the little crowned and waiting figures are patients taking a cure, and the whole intricate plumbing is the imagined architecture of the grandest healing spa a 15th century mind could conjure. The second guess narrows the medicine to a particular kind. Many who have studied this section, looking at the figures who are so predominantly female, have wondered whether these pages are specifically about women's health, about the body's reproductive life, about fertility and the slow recoveries of childbirth, about the monthly rhythms of the female body, all of which the medieval medical world treated with baths and warm waters and careful soakings. The baths of that era really were prescribed for such things, to warm the womb, to ease the recovery of a mother after birth, to coax a reluctant body back into its natural cycles. Read this way, the green channels become something even more intimate and bodily, and the gathering of women in the warm water becomes a kind of gentle illustrated guide to the health of women, drawn by someone who thought the subject important enough to fill an entire quire with it. And the third guest steps away from medicine altogether and into the strange, dreaming world of alchemy, that old half-science, half-philosophy that the people of this age took entirely seriously, the art of transformation, of turning base things into precious ones, of distilling and dissolving and recombining the hidden essences of matter. To the alchemical eye, the bathing pages look like a diagram of a process. The green liquid a substance being purified, the connected vessels the apparatus of distillation, the figures moving from pool to pool the stages of a transformation, a thing being broken down and washed and remade. Alchemists love to hide their meanings inside pictures of exactly this kind, figures bathing, fluids flowing, vessels joined by tubes, precisely because the images concealed as much as they revealed. If the Voynich bathing pages are alchemical, then the little bathers are not people at all but symbols, and the green water is not water but some imagined essence, and the whole page is a coded recipe for a transformation that may never have been possible in the first place. 3 guesses, then medicine, women's health, alchemy, and the truth is that none of them has ever been confirmed, and it is entirely possible that the real answer is some 4th thing no one has yet thought of, or some blend of all 3, or something that made perfect sense to its maker and will simply never make sense to us again. The text that surrounds the bathing figures, the looping unreadable script that fills the margins and runs in labels beside the pools, might tell us in a single sentence which of these guesses is right. But the text cannot be read, it has never been read, so the pictures must speak alone, and pictures, for all their charm, are not very good at settling arguments. They show us the bathers and the green water and the endless looping pipes, and then they fall silent as the rest of this beautiful, locked, untranslatable book. There is something in that silence, though, that need not trouble you at all tonight, quite the opposite. For all the puzzle of it, this is one of the warmest pages in the manuscript, warm in its colors, warm in its imagined waters, warm in the gathered company of all those small, calm figures soaking together in the green. Whatever the page was meant to teach, whatever cure or process or secret it was drawn to record, the surface feeling of it is one of deep ease, of bodies at rest in warm water, of nothing being asked of anyone, of a long, slow soak with all the time in the world. The little bathers wait in their pools the way you are resting now, weightless, held, going nowhere. And if you let your mind drift down the green channels with them, from one pool to the next, around the gentle looping course of the water, you will find that the question of what it all means matters less and less with every turn. You do not need to solve it. No one ever has, and the world has gone on turning, and the bathers have stayed exactly where they are, suspended in their pale green water for 600 years and more, perfectly content, perfectly silent, asking nothing of anyone who looks. So let the page hold you for a little while longer. Let the green water rise gently around you. Picture the long looping channels carrying you slowly along, past the wide warm basins where the little figures stand and wait, past the narrow ducts where they drift in quiet single file around the curling corners of the parchment and back again. The whole intricate gentle system breathing its slow circulation the way the tide breathes, the way the blood breathes, the way you are breathing now, slower and slower down towards sleep. There is nothing here to decode tonight. There is only the warm green water and the small calm company of bathers who have been resting in it longer than anyone can say, and the soft brown parchment holding all of it safe, page after page, in a book that keeps its secrets the way the deep waters keep theirs, completely, peacefully, and without the slightest wish to be understood. Rest there with them. Let the channels carry you. The water is warm and the page is patient, and there is nowhere at all that you need to go. Imagine a letter, sealed, traveling slowly southward across the middle of the 17th century. It is the autumn of 1665, or perhaps the early days of 1666. The date itself has been read both ways, the ink a little uncertain on the page, and the letter is leaving the city of Prague, carried by hand and by horse and by the slow, patient logistics of an age that had not yet learned to hurry. Folded inside its journey, wrapped and protected, travels a book. A small, thick book of soft, pale vellum, its pages crowded with a writing no one can read and with drawings of plants that do not grow anywhere on earth. The book is bound for Rome, for a single particular reader, and the man who is sending it away is old now and tired and has given up the puzzle at last. He is letting the book go the way you let go of a thing you have carried too long, not in triumph and not in defeat, but simply because the time has come and another set of hands has been found to take the weight. The man sending it is named Johannes Marcus Marseille, Jan Merck Marseille, of the town the Latin documents call Kronland or Kronland. He is a physician of real distinction, the chief medical man of the Bohemian capital, a scholar who has spent his life among the educated men of Prague and has earned the right to be tired. And the letter he tucks into the parcel is a strange and wonderful thing, because it is, as far as anyone has ever found, the single oldest written word about this book that survives anywhere in the world. Everything we know about where the manuscript had been before it reached Marseille's desk, we know because an old doctor in Prague sat down one autumn and wrote a few careful paragraphs to a friend in Rome, and because that letter, against all the odds of 3.5 centuries, was never lost. The letter is still tucked into the manuscript today. It traveled with the book all the way, and it is there now in a library in Connecticut, the oldest voice in the whole long story, still speaking. Let us read it slowly, the way Marseille's friend would have read it, by candlelight in a stone room in Rome. The friend's name is Athanasius Kircher, and he is, in his own time, perhaps the most famous scholar alive, a Jesuit priest, a German by birth, a man of monstrous and sprawling curiosity who has written books on magnetism and music and the inner fires of the earth, who keeps a museum of marvels in the Collegio Romano, the great Jesuit college in the heart of the city. Kircher has a particular and well-advertised gift, or so the educated world believes. He can read forgotten languages. He has claimed to crack the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt, a claim that later centuries would gently and completely overturn, but which in his own lifetime made him the man to whom you sent your unreadable things. And so when an old physician in Prague found himself holding a book that no one could read, he thought of Kircher in Rome, the way you think of the one person you know who might possibly have the key. Marseille's letter is brief and courteous and full of the small, honest hesitations of a man who is not entirely sure what he is sending. He tells Kircher that the book is a gift, freely given, and that he wishes Kircher to have it. He explains how it came to him, that it had belonged to a dear friend, a man named Georg Bersch, who had puzzled over it for many years and had died, and that the book had passed to Marseille as part of Bersch's library. And then he passes along 2 pieces of hearsay, 2 stories about the book's past that he is careful to label as stories, things he has heard rather than things he knows. The honesty of that is worth pausing on, because so much of what came afterward would lose exactly that honesty. Marseille tells Kircher, "Here is what I have been told, and I cannot vouch for it, but I pass it to you for what it is worth." The first story is about money and about an emperor. Marseille writes that he had heard the book was once bought by the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, Rudolph of Bohemia, who held his strange and glittering court in Prague in the decades around the year 1600, and that the emperor had paid the astonishing sum of 600 gold ducats for it. 600 ducats. It is a number that has echoed down through every retelling of this story ever since, because it is so much money, such a serious and royal price, that it seems to promise the book must be worth something extraordinary. Why would an emperor pay a fortune for a book no one could read, unless he had reason to believe it held a secret worth having? It is worth knowing what kind of emperor Rudolph was, because he is exactly the sort of man who would do such a thing. He cared little for the ordinary business of ruling, for armies and borders and the management of his sprawling realm, and cared enormously for the strange and the rare and the secret. He gathered to his court in Prague the alchemists and astrologers and instrument makers and collectors of the age. He kept a Kunstkammer, a chamber of wonders, stuffed with curiosities from every corner of the known world, narwhal tusks sold as the horns of unicorns, mechanical clocks, exotic animals, paintings, stones with powers, books of secrets. The astronomers Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler both worked under his patronage. The English magus John Dee and his unsettling companion Edward Kelly passed through his court, peddling visions and the promise of transmuted gold. If there was anywhere in Europe where a mysterious cipher book might have changed hands for 600 ducats, it was the court of Rudolph II, where a fortune for a secret was simply the cost of doing the kind of business Rudolph liked best. It is worth dwelling, too, on just how much money 600 ducats was, because the number means little until you set it against the world it was spent in. A ducat was a coin of nearly pure gold, the trusted currency of the age, and 600 of them was not the price of a curiosity, but the price of a substantial property, a sum that could buy a fine house, or keep a household of servants for years, or furnish a man with a small fortune to live on. To lay out such an amount for a single book, in a book that no one could read, is the kind of extravagance that only makes sense in the mind of a collector who valued mystery itself, who would rather possess one genuine and unsolved secret than a shelf of ordinary answered things. And there is a small piece of corroboration tucked into the dusty court records of the period, which scholars have noted with quiet interest. A bookseller of Augsburg named Karl Weidmann is reported as having sold books to the Emperor Rudolf around the turn of the 17th century for a price in gold pieces that comes close to the figure in Marseille's letter. It is not proof. It is only a faint chime, a number in an old ledger that rhymes with a number in an old letter, the kind of small accidental harmony that makes a historian sit up a little straighter, and then, just as quickly, remember to be careful. And the second story Marseille passed along is about who might have written the book in the first place. He reports that a man he names Raphael, a tutor in the Czech language to King Ferdinand III, a scholar named Raphael Mniszewski, had told him that the author was believed to be an Englishman named Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon, a 13th century friar and philosopher, one of the genuinely brilliant minds of the medieval world, a man who wrote about optics and mathematics and the experimental study of nature, and who acquired in the centuries after his death a glittering second reputation as a kind of wizard, a keeper of forbidden knowledge, a man who knew things he should not have known. If Roger Bacon had written a book in a secret cipher, the reasoning went, then surely it must contain some great hidden learning, some science centuries ahead of its time, locked away from unworthy eyes. It is a beautiful story, the Roger Bacon story. It is also almost certainly not true, and it is worth sitting with the gentle way it falls apart, because the way it falls apart tells you something about the whole long history of this book. Roger Bacon died around the year 1292. The manuscript, when scientists finally laid a sliver of its vellum under their instruments in our own century and measured the slow decay of carbon within it, turned out to have been made from the skins of animals that lived in the early 1400s, somewhere between 1404 and 1438, a full century after Bacon was in his grave. Roger Bacon could no more have written on that vellum than you could write a letter on paper that will not be made until long after you are gone. The attribution was a guess, a hopeful guess, passed from one man to another as a thing someone had heard, and Marseille, to his great credit, labeled it exactly that. But it traveled with the book, this glittering false name, and for centuries it shaped how people saw the manuscript as a lost work of a famous genius, rather than as the anonymous and far stranger thing it actually is. So that is the letter, a gift, an honest scrap of hearsay about an emperor and a price, and a borrowed guess about a long-dead English friar. And behind the letter, dimly, we can make out the figures who held the book before Marseille ever did. They are shadowy, these earlier owners, but they are real, and we can follow the chain back link by link, the way you trace a thread back through a tangle, until the thread simply ends in the dark. The link just before Marseille is the man he names in the letter itself, George Berch, an alchemist of Prague, a man we know almost nothing about except that this book consumed a good part of his life. Berch had the manuscript for years, perhaps decades, in the early 1600s, and he was tormented by it in the gentle, scholarly way that this book torments everyone who takes it seriously. He could not read it. He believed it might contain medical or alchemical secrets, knowledge of plants, of healing, of the hidden properties of things. And so, before Marseille ever sent the book to Kircher, Berch himself had written to Kircher, years earlier, copying out small samples of the strange writing by hand and mailing them to Rome, begging the famous decipherer to take a look and tell him what it said. Kircher's reply, if he replied, did not solve anything. But the trail of those letters is part of how scholars in our own age have been able to stitch the early history together, because the great Kircher was a hoarder of correspondence, and his vast archive of letters survived, and tucked within it were these earlier, almost forgotten appeals from a Prague alchemist about an unreadable book. There is something quietly moving in that picture, an alchemist hunched over the pages by lamplight, year after year, certain there is meaning in them and unable to reach it, finally swallowing his pride and copying out a few lines in his own careful hand to send across the Alps to a stranger, a famous man who has never heard of him, in the hope of an answer that never properly comes. Berch called the book in one of those letters, a thing that had been uselessly taking up space in his library, and you can hear in that phrase the long weariness of a man who has loved a puzzle past the point of pleasure. He had even guessed, looking at the drawings of unfamiliar plants and the strange diagrams, that the author might have been a traveler in the East, gathering medical wisdom from far-off lands, a guess as reasonable and as unprovable as any that came after it. Berch died, and the book passed to his friend the physician Marseille, and Marseille in his turn grew old and sent it south. And before Bersh, here the chain grows fainter still, but there is one more name, and it is written faintly on the book itself. On the very first page of the manuscript, in the lower margin, there is a signature, a name in faded ink, partly rubbed away, that scholars under ultraviolet light have read as Jacobus de Tepenek. Jacobus Horčíky de Tepenek, Jacob Horčíky, a man who had risen from poor beginnings to become the personal physician and pharmacist to the court of, yes, Rudolf II himself. He was ennobled, given the noble name de Tepenek, sometime around 1608, which means the signature could only have been written after that date, a small, precise clue, a single dated knot in the thread. If Jacobus owned the book and signed it, and if Jacobus was Rudolf's own physician, then the story of the emperor's ownership begins to fit together. Perhaps the book passed from the emperor's collection after Rudolf's death into the hands of his physician, and from the physician eventually into the alchemist Bersh's library, and from Bersh to Marseille, and from Marseille to Kircher in Rome. A chain of Prague scholars handing the puzzle along, none of them able to solve it, each of them eventually setting it down. You can let the names settle softly now. Jacobus, Bersh, Marseille, three men of one city across one strange generation, all of them turning the same uncrackable pages by the same kind of candlelight, all of them gone now, all of them part of the book's long memory. The manuscript outlived every one of them, as it has outlived everyone who has ever held it, patient and pale and unreadable, passing from warm living hands into other warm living hands and on into the dark. The letter reached Rome, the book reached Kircher, and then something quietly remarkable happens in the story, which is that almost nothing happens at all. Kircher, the great decipherer, the man who could read the language of the pharaohs, seems to have done nothing with the book that we can trace. He did not announce a solution. He did not publish a triumphant reading. He did not, as far as the record shows, even mention having received it. The most famous code reader of the age took possession of the most famous code in the world, and the two of them simply went silent together. The book vanished into the libraries of the Jesuits, into the collections of the Collegio Romano, and there it stayed while the centuries turned over outside. And what centuries they were to sleep through. The book lay in Jesuit keeping while Europe convulsed and reshaped itself again and again. It lay there through the suppression of the Jesuit order in 1773, when the society was dissolved by the Pope and its houses scattered, and through the order's restoration decades later. It lay there as Napoleon rose and fell, as old kingdoms ended and new nations were born. When the new kingdom of Italy seized the property of the religious orders in the years around 1870, the most precious books were quietly moved and hidden, shifted into private hands and country villas to keep them safe from confiscation, and the manuscript moved with them into the keeping of a Jesuit residence in the hills outside Rome. For something close to 250 years from the candlelit room where Kircher set it aside to the dawn of the 20th century, the book is simply gone from the record. No letters, no mentions, no scholars puzzling at it. It sleeps, the way the whole episode this chapter describes seems built to make you sleep. A quarter of a millennium of perfect quiet, the pages neither read nor lost, only waiting. Then in the year 1912, a man with a good eye for old books walks into the story, and the book wakes up. His name is Wilfrid Voynich, and he will give the manuscript the name it carries to this day. He is a book dealer, one of the finest of his era, with a life behind him as strange as anything in his stock. Born in what was then the Russian-ruled lands of Poland and Lithuania, he had been a revolutionary in his youth, arrested and imprisoned and sent to exile in Siberia, and had escaped and made his way across the world to London, where he reinvented himself as a dealer in rare and antique books, prowling the monasteries and old libraries of Europe for treasures that others had overlooked. In 1912, his travels brought him to a villa in the hills near Frascati, just southeast of Rome, the Villa Mondragon, by the account that he gave, and that has been retold ever since, where the Jesuits, quietly and under conditions of secrecy, were selling off a portion of their old collections to raise money. Voynich was invited to look. And among the books, in the way these things are always told, he found a small, unprepossessing, deeply strange volume of pale vellum, crowded with a writing he could not read and pictures of plants that did not exist. He bought it, we are bound in honesty to add a small footnote here, because later scholars combing the Jesuit archives came to believe that the true hiding place may not have been the romantic Villa Mondragon at all, but a different Jesuit house nearby, at Castel Gandolfo, and that Voynich may have softened the details to protect the men he had promised secrecy. The romance of the discovery, in other words, may be a little burnished. But the essential fact is solid and unchanged. In 1912, in a Jesuit villa in the hills outside Rome, after 2.5 centuries of silence, the book changed hands, and a man who understood exactly how rare and how baffling a thing he was holding carried it out into the light of the modern age. Voynich spent the rest of his life trying to learn what it was. He photographed its pages and sent copies to the great cryptographers and scholars and medievalists of his day, hungry for anyone to read it. He believed, as so many had before him, that it was the work of Roger Bacon. He staked a great deal of his reputation on that belief, and it was never proven, and the carbon in the vellum would one day quietly retire it for good. He died in 1930 in New York with the book unread, the secret intact. And here the chain of owners gathers itself for its final, gentler links, and they have a quiet domestic tenderness to them, very different from emperors and Jesuits and exiled revolutionaries. When Wilfrid Voynich died, the manuscript passed to his widow, Ethel Lillian Voynich, herself a remarkable person, a novelist whose book, The Gadfly, had been wildly, enormously popular in faraway Russia, a woman who had lived her own full life quite apart from the book that now bore her married name. She kept it, she did not sell it. And when she in turn died in 1960, the manuscript passed to her longtime friend and companion, a woman named Anne Nill, who had worked for years as the secretary in Voynich's book business and who had helped care for the manuscript across the decades. The strangest book in the world spent the middle of the 20th century in the keeping of these two devoted women, quietly held, quietly guarded, still unread. Anne Nill in 1961 sold it at last to one more dealer in rare books, a man named Hans Peter Krauss, a great New York antiquarian who bought it for a sum recorded as $24,500, hoping, as dealers do, to sell it on for a great deal more. He priced it high. He believed surely that the world's most mysterious manuscript would find some collector willing to pay a fortune for the privilege of owning the unsolved, but no such buyer ever came. The book that an emperor had supposedly bought for 600 gold ducats now sat on a modern dealer's shelf, unsellable, too strange and too uncertain for any buyer to value. And so, in the end, in 1969, Hans Krauss did the thing that finally ended the long chain of private owners. He gave it away. He donated the manuscript to Yale University, to the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where it was catalogued, soberly and simply, as manuscript number 408. And there, in a climate-controlled vault on a university campus in Connecticut, the book rests today, the end, for now, of a journey that began with the skin of an animal alive in the early 1400s, that passed through the glittering court of a holy Roman emperor and the candlelit studies of Prague alchemists, that traveled sealed across 17th century Europe into the hands of the most famous scholar of his age, that slept for 2.5 centuries in Jesuit keeping, that surfaced in a hillside villa near Rome, that crossed an ocean, that was held and loved and guarded by a revolutionary and a novelist and a faithful secretary, and that finally came to rest in a great library that takes care, very gently, of things that cannot be explained. The letter that Marseille sealed in Prague all those autumns ago still travels with it, tucked into its pages, the oldest voice in the whole story, still saying the same modest, honest thing it always said. Here is what I have been told, and I cannot vouch for it, but I pass it on to you for what it is worth. 600 ducats, an English friar who could not have written it, a chain of careful men who could not read it, handing it gently down the years. None of them solved it, every one of them let it go. And the book outlasted all of them, and it is sleeping in its vault tonight, exactly as it slept through the long Jesuit silence, exactly as you are beginning to sleep now. The unreadable pages closed, the strange plants folded into the dark, the whole long patient mystery asking nothing of you at all, content as it has always been content, simply to wait. Picture a small room late at night, somewhere in Virginia in the middle years of the 20th century. A desk lamp throws a warm circle of light onto a wooden desk, and the rest of the room is in shadow, and the house around it is asleep. On the desk lie photostats, black and white photographic copies of the manuscript's pages, the strange looping letters reversed white on a dark ground, or printed dark on white, depending on which copies these are. A man sits over them with a pencil and a ruled pad, and he has been there for hours. His coffee has gone cold at his elbow. He is not in a hurry. He has the particular stillness of someone who has done this kind of work for most of his life, the stillness of a person who has learned that the answer does not come faster for being chased. He copies out a row of the little characters. He counts them. He tallies how often each one appears, and where in the word it tends to sit, and which characters like to stand beside which others. He is looking, as he has looked at 1,000 other texts, for the crack in the wall, the small regularity that will let him get a fingernail in and begin, gently, to pry. Tonight, as on so many nights, the wall does not crack. But he sets it down without frustration, and he turns off the lamp, and the page goes dark, and the little letters wait in the dark to be looked at again tomorrow. That man, or someone very like him, is where we are going tonight, into the long, quiet labor of the people who tried to read the unreadable book. Not the alchemists and astrologers we have met in earlier hours, not the scribes who made it, or the collectors who carried it from hand to hand, but the codebreakers, the ones who came to this manuscript not as a curiosity to admire, but as a problem to solve. Some of them were amateurs working alone at kitchen tables. Some of them were among the finest cryptanalysts the world has ever produced, people who had broken the most secret ciphers of empires and read the private mail of nations. They came at this little book with everything they had, with patience and brilliance, and in time with machines and statistics and computers. And the book, so far, has held. That is the story of this chapter. It is not a story of failure exactly, because each of them learned something, and what they learned narrows the mystery and makes it sharper. It is more a story of a thing that has resisted the best efforts of the cleverest people for a very long time, and resists them still calmly, the way the sea resists being held in the hand. Begin with the greatest of them, because his story sits at the center of all the others. His name was William Frederick Friedman, and he was, by wide agreement, the most accomplished cryptanalyst the United States ever produced, and perhaps one of the most accomplished anyone produced anywhere. He is the man whose team broke the Japanese diplomatic cipher that the Americans called Purple in the years before and during the Second World War, a feat so difficult and so consequential that it shaped the course of the war in the Pacific. He more or less invented the modern statistical approach to breaking codes. He coined the very word cryptanalysis. If anyone alive could read a secret writing, it was William Friedman. And the Voynich Manuscript fascinated him for nearly his entire adult life. He first encountered it early in his career, and it never quite let him go. Over the decades, he returned to it again and again, in the margins of a life otherwise spent on the most serious cryptographic work imaginable. And because he was who he was, he did not just stare at it alone under a lamp, though surely he did plenty of that. He organized study groups, teams of skilled people, some of them his own colleagues from the world of professional code-breaking, who would gather and pool their efforts against this single stubborn text. There was a first study group formed in the 1940s that brought together cryptanalysts and scholars to attack the problem systematically. There was a second years later that tried again with fresh eyes and better photographs and the early help of machines. These were not idle hobbyists. These were people who broke codes for a living, applying their professional methods in their off hours to the most famous unsolved cipher in the world, and they did not break it. But Friedman did arrive at a conclusion, a careful, tentative, hard-won conclusion, and it is one of the most important things anyone has ever said about the manuscript. He came to believe that the Voynich text was not a cipher in the ordinary sense at all, not a message written in plain language and then disguised by some system of substitution or transposition, the kind of thing he had spent his life unwrapping. Instead, he came to suspect the text might be something stranger and in a way more interesting, an early attempt to build an artificial language, a constructed language made up deliberately from scratch according to some logical scheme, a language where the words are not encoded versions of Latin or German or any natural tongue, but are themselves invented things built to a plan. He was so cautious about this idea and so aware that he might be wrong that he did a curious thing with it. He wrote his conclusion down in the form of a riddle, an anagram, a sentence whose letters were scrambled, and he set it aside in a sealed form, so that it could be opened later and checked, proving what he had thought without his having to commit to it publicly while he was still uncertain. After his death, the anagram was unscrambled, and the hidden sentence read, in effect, that the Voynich Manuscript was an early attempt to construct an artificial or universal language of the kind that scholars call a priori, a language reasoned out from first principles rather than grown naturally among the people. He was thinking of the great projects of the 1600s, of men like John Wilkins and George Delgarno, who tried in that century to design perfect philosophical languages where every word would carry its own definition inside its structure. Friedman wondered whether the Voynich might be a much earlier, much cruder ancestor of that impulse, a homemade universal language, built by someone in the 1400s for reasons we can no longer recover. It is worth sitting with that for a moment because of who said it. The finest codebreaker of the age looked at this book for most of his life and concluded in the end that the reason he could not break it might be that there was no code to break in the usual sense, that the thing was built on a foundation entirely unlike the secret messages he knew how to read. That is not the same as solving it. He could not actually read a single line. But it was a profound narrowing of the question, and it pointed later researchers toward a whole family of possibilities that are still very much alive today. And notice the humility in how he held it. Here was a man who could be ruthless and certain when the evidence was there, who had stared down the diplomatic ciphers of an empire and prized them open one careful setting at a time, and yet with the Voynich he would not let himself say more than the evidence allowed. He hid his best guess inside an anagram precisely so that it could not become a flag he was tempted to defend, so that his own reputation would never tilt the scales of what was true. That is a rare kind of discipline, and it is exactly the discipline the manuscript seems to demand and so rarely receives. The book rewards the patient and punishes the eager, and Friedman, who had every reason to be eager, chose patience to the end. He died without reading it, and he is in good company, and there is no shame in that company at all. Now we must go back before Friedman to a man whose story is sadder and more cautionary, because it shows what this manuscript does to people who want too badly to win. His name was William Romaine Newbold, and he was a professor of philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania in the early 1900s, a respected scholar, a learned man, by all accounts a kind one. In the years just after Wilfrid Voynich brought the manuscript to public attention, Newbold threw himself at it, and in 1921 he announced, to considerable excitement, that he had cracked it. His theory was extraordinary in that perhaps should have been the first warning. Newbold claimed that the visible letters of the Voynich script were not themselves the real text at all. The real text, he said, was hidden in tiny, almost invisible markings along the edges of each pen stroke micrographic shorthand, a secret writing so small you needed magnification to see it, a code concealed inside the very ink of the letters. He believed these microscopic marks were a form of ancient Greek shorthand, and that when you teased them out and rearranged them, they yielded Latin text. And working from this premise, he produced translations, dramatic ones. He concluded that the manuscript had been written by the medieval philosopher Roger Bacon, and that Bacon had been a scientific genius centuries ahead of his time, who had seen living cells through a microscope and spiral galaxies through a telescope, all recorded in this secret book. It was a thrilling story. For a few years, many people believed it. But it was not true, and the way it came apart is instructive. After Newbold's death, his friend John Matthews Manley, himself a capable scholar and a man who had done real cryptographic work during the First World War, went carefully through the method, and he demonstrated that it did not hold. The tiny markings that Newbold had seen along the edges of the strokes were not a secret shorthand at all. They were simply what happens to ink as it dries and ages on rough animal skin, cracks. The microscopic marks were cracks in old ink, natural, meaningless, the ordinary crazing of a 600-year-old page. And the worst of it, the part that makes Newbold's story a quiet tragedy rather than merely an error, was this: because his method allowed so much freedom in how you interpreted those cracks and how you grouped and rearranged the imagined letters, you could make it produce almost anything you wanted. The translations were not coming out of the manuscript. They were coming out of Newbold, who had read into the cracks the wonders he longed to find. He had not been dishonest. He had simply wanted it so much that he saw it. Manley's refutation was thorough and final, and the micrographic theory has been set gently aside ever since. But it stands as the great warning that hangs over all Voynich research. This book is so empty of obvious meaning that it will hold whatever meaning you pour into it, and the more you want to win, the more likely you are to fool only yourself. So those are the two poles of the early effort: Newbold, who believed he had won and had not, and Friedman, who knew he had not won but understood the problem more deeply than anyone before him. Between and after them came a whole quiet community of researchers, and the discoveries they made, while none of them broke the book, slowly built up a picture of what kind of thing it is, and that picture is worth knowing, because it is the reason the mystery has survived every claimed solution. One of the most important of these quiet discoveries came from a man named Prescott Currier, a naval cryptanalyst who studied the manuscript in the 1970s. courier noticed something that careful eyes had half seen before, but that he pinned down precisely. The text is not all written by the same hand, and more than that, it is not all written in the same way. He could distinguish at least two different scribes by their handwriting. But beyond the handwriting, he found something stranger, that the text itself fell into two different statistical systems, two different patterns of which letters and combinations appear, and how often, almost as if the book were written in two related but distinct dialects of its own invented tongue. Scholars call these Courier A and Courier B, the two languages of the Voynich. They are not separate enough to be unrelated, but they are different enough to be real. Whatever this writing is, it has internal structure complex enough to vary like that, the way the speech of two regions of one country varies, and that is not what you expect from random scribbling. And this brings us to the heart of why the manuscript is so maddening, and why it has defeated computers as thoroughly as it defeated the men with pencils. When you measure the Voynich text the way linguists and statisticians measure language, it behaves, in many ways, exactly like a real language. The frequencies of its words follow the same characteristic curve that the words of natural languages follow, a small number of words appearing very often, a great many words appearing rarely, and the smooth, lopsided distribution that real human language produces and that random gibberish generally does not. Its words have regular internal structure. Certain characters cluster at the beginnings of words, others at the ends, the way prefixes and suffixes behave. There are words that recur, that travel together, that seem to gather on the pages whose pictures share a theme, as though the labels match the drawings. By a great many measures, this looks like meaningful writing. But by other measures, it does not behave like any language we know. Its words are too regular, too predictable. Once you have seen the first few letters of a Voynich word, you can guess the rest far more reliably than you could in English or Latin or Arabic. The information packed into each letter is unusually low, lower than natural languages tend to run. The lengths of the words cluster too tightly around a single typical length, where real languages spread out more. And there are odd local patterns, words that shift subtly depending on where they sit in a line, near the margin or in the middle, which is not how ordinary writing works at all. So the text sits in a strange middle country, too structured and language-like to be mere nonsense, too regular and peculiar to be any natural language written down in a straightforward way. It is this exact in-betweenness that has broken every attempt. A simple substitution cipher would have fallen to Friedman's statistics decades ago. Plain gibberish would have failed the tests of language-like structure. The Voynich passes some tests and fails others, and no theory yet proposed accounts cleanly for all of it. That in-betweenness is also what keeps one particular theory alive, the idea that the whole thing might be an elaborate and very clever hoax, meaningless from the start, designed only to look like writing. The most careful version of this argument came from a researcher named Gordon Rugg in the early 2000s. Rugg pointed out that you did not need a real language to produce text with many of the Voynich's strange statistical properties. Using a simple low-technology device, a sheet with windows cut in it called a Cardan grill, laid over a table of invented syllables and slid around to pick out combinations, a forger could generate page after page of plausible-looking word salad, words that share roots and endings and follow internal rules, fast enough to fill a book, all without any of it ever meaning a single thing. If that were possible, then perhaps the manuscript was made to be sold to a wealthy, gullible collector as a book of secret wisdom, and the secret was that there was no secret at all. It is a genuinely clever argument, and it cannot be dismissed out of hand, but it has met serious counterarguments, and they are worth holding alongside it. The grill method in its simple form can reproduce some of the manuscript's features, but stumbles on others, the deeper statistical patterns, the long-range structure, the way certain words and ideas seem to cluster meaningfully through the text. One physicist's analysis found that meaningful-seeming relationships run through the manuscript at a scale that would have been very hard to fake deliberately, especially using knowledge of how language behaves that simply had not been worked out in the time the manuscript was made. And there is the plain awkwardness of the timeline. The kind of grill Rugg invoked is associated with a period somewhat later than the manuscript itself, so a forger would have had to anticipate the technique. None of this proves the hoax theory wrong. It only keeps it from being proven right. The book sits there between the explanations, declining all of them. Through all the recent decades, a small, devoted community has kept at it, careful, skeptical, mostly amateur in the old honorable sense, doing the work for love of the problem. There is the researcher Nicholas Pelling, who has written one of the more sober book-length treatments of the manuscript, and who keeps a long-running site where claimed solutions are weighed and usually gently taken apart. There was the linguist Stephen Bax, who proposed that he had provisionally read a handful of words, plant names, a star name, by matching them to the pictures beside them, a modest and methodical claim that, even so, has not opened the rest of the book. There are the statisticians and computational linguists, people like Claire Bowen and her colleagues, who have brought the full power of modern language analysis to bear, and who conclude cautiously that the text is probably not gibberish and probably not the product of a simple cipher, most likely some encoding of a real language or a constructed one, by a method we have not yet guessed. Their honesty is the honesty of people who would rather say we do not know than say something untrue. And every few years, the world is told the mystery is solved. The headlines arrive with great confidence. A researcher has cracked it. The Voynich speaks at last. There was a much-publicized claim a few years back that the manuscript was written in a lost Proto-Romance language, announced with a respected university's name attached to it. Within days, the experts had read the work, found the method inconsistent and the translations arbitrary, the supposed rules of the language bent and broken to suit each word, and the university quietly withdrew its announcement. There have been claims that it is Hebrew run through a cipher and then through early machine translation, claims of Turkish, claims of a forgotten tongue from far away, claims of shorthand and of vowel-less scripts, and of a dozen other things. Some are made in good faith and some are made for attention, but they share a common fate. They are examined by the people who know the manuscript best, and they do not survive the examination. Not because the examiners are closed-minded, but because the manuscript's real statistical behavior is so specific and so strange that almost any theory, tested against the whole text rather than a flattering fragment, breaks down. The book has a kind of immune system, built of its own peculiarity, and it has rejected every key offered to it so far. So why does it still resist the computers, the artificial intelligences, the machines that can translate between living languages in a heartbeat and read the faded scrolls of buried libraries? Partly because those machines learn by example. They need a great deal of known text or a known relative of the language to learn from, and the Voynich has neither. It is the only document in its language, if it is a language. There is nothing to compare it to, no Rosetta Stone, no second text in the same hand in a known tongue. And partly because the machines, for all their power, are pattern finders, and this manuscript is precisely the kind of thing that lures a pattern finder into seeing patterns that confirm whatever it was told to look for. Point a powerful enough system at the Voynich and tell it to find Latin, and it will hand you something Latin-shaped. Tell it to find Hebrew, and it will oblige, and none of these will be the truth, only the machine's eagerness reflected back. The very cleverness of the tools becomes a trap, the same trap that swallowed Newbold 100 years ago, only faster and more confident. The book demands a discipline that wanting cannot supply. And so the lamp clicks off again in room after room, year after year. The codebreakers have come and gone, the genius who decided it might be an invented language, the dreamer who saw a hidden world in the cracks of the ink, the naval officer who found two voices in the writing, the physicist with his statistics, the quiet community trading findings late into the night, the machines humming through their billions of guesses. Each of them learned something, and what they learned is real and lasting, that the text is structured, that it has more than one hand and more than one system, that it behaves like language in some ways and like nothing on earth in others, that it is not a simple cipher and probably not pure nonsense, and that it will not give up its meaning to anyone who has so far asked. The wall has been measured by the finest instruments we have. It has been mapped, photographed, modeled, and run through every machine, and it stands, smooth and unbroken, exactly as tall as it was 100 years ago. There is something almost restful in that when you stop wanting to win. The book is not refusing us out of malice. It is simply being what it is, a thing made by a mind we cannot reach, by a method we have not guessed, for a purpose its maker did not write down. The cleverest people in the world have sat where you are sitting, in their own circles of lamplight, and they have not solved it, and they slept anyway and woke and tried again, and the not knowing did not harm them. It is allowed to remain unread. The little letters can stay in the dark on the photostats, patient, unhurried, asking nothing of you tonight. The codebreakers laid down their pencils one by one and let the night take the page, and the page did not mind, and morning came regardless. Let it be unsolved a little longer. Let the wall stand. There is no message you are required to read before you rest, no cipher you must crack to be allowed to let go. The book has waited 600 years. It can wait through the night while you sleep. and it will still be there, just as silent and just as whole, whenever anyone next switches on the lamp. There's a reading room in New Haven, Connecticut, on the campus of Yale University, where the light comes down soft and even through walls of thin, translucent marble. And in a vault below that room, kept at a steady, cool temperature in the dark, there lies a small book of about 240 pages, bound in limp vellum that no living person can read. It has a name and a number, Beinecke Manuscript 408, and it has a story that we have followed all the long way through this night, from the quiet library where it now rests, back through the chain of hands that carried it across the centuries, through its garden of plants that grow nowhere on earth, its wheels of stars, its small bathing figures, its careful, unreadable script. And now at the end of all of it, there's nothing left to do but sit with the simple fact of it, the way you might sit with a small mystery at the end of a long day and let it be what it is. There's nothing here that needs to worry you. This is the gentlest part of the whole long journey, the part where everything that seems strange is set softly down, one piece at a time, until all that remains is a quiet book in a quiet room, harming no one, asking nothing, keeping its secret in the dark. Let the words come slowly, at whatever pace the night allows, and let yourself drift down, gently, towards sleep. Let us begin, as we did with everything tonight, by being honest about what is actually known, because what is known is solid, and there is comfort in solid things. The book is real. That is the first and steadiest fact. It is not a rumor, not a story that dissolves when you go looking for the original record, the way so many mysteries do. It exists. You could, if you were granted the privilege, hold it in your two hands. It is made of vellum calfskin, scraped and stretched and cut into lathes, and that vellum has been carbon dated by the careful instruments of the University of Arizona. 4 small samples taken from the margins, and the answer the instruments gave was clear and narrow. The animals whose skins became these pages died in the early 15th century, somewhere between 1404 and 1438, with 95% confidence. That is a small window, only a few decades, and the tightness of it suggests the skins may have come from a single herd, slaughtered around a single season in Central Europe 600 years ago. So we know when the canvas was made, and we know too that the writing came soon after, because the ink sits properly on the surface in the way that ink does when it meets fresh vellum rather than old. It is iron gall ink, the ordinary, reliable writing ink of medieval Europe, made from oak galls and iron salts, and the colors of the illustrations are mineral pigments of exactly the kind a 15th century hand would have reached for. There is no anachronism in the materials. Nothing in the physical substance of the book whispers of a later forgery, of a clever Victorian hoaxer assembling something to fool the credulous. The substance is honest. It is what it appears to be, a real book made in the first decades of the 1400s by people who used the materials of their own time, exactly as you would expect. And we know something about the hand that wrote it. The script flows. That is the thing the scholars keep returning to, the thing that is so quietly remarkable when you sit with it. Whoever made these marks did not labor over them, did not draw each strange character slowly and deliberately the way a forger inventing nonsense would have to draw it, glancing back and forth, second-guessing. The pen moves with the easy confidence of someone writing in a script they know by heart, a hand that has made these shapes 10,000 times before, fluently without hesitation, page after page after page. To most of the people who have studied it closely, it looks like the work of a single scribe, or perhaps 2 working in close harmony in one steady hand, carrying a single project from beginning to end, writing something they understood in a system they had wholly mastered. That fluency is one of the deepest puzzles of the whole book, and also, strangely, one of its warmest details. Someone sat at a table 6 centuries ago, in some room we will never see, and wrote this out with the calm assurance of a person doing familiar work. There was nothing frantic in it. It was made with care. And here is perhaps the strangest known thing of all, the thing that has kept the careful, sober scholars from ever quite being able to dismiss the book as mere decoration or madness. The text behaves like language. When you feed it to the patient machinery of statistics, counting how often each word appears, measuring how the words are distributed across the pages, it obeys the same deep mathematical laws that real human languages obey. The most common word appears about twice as often as the second most common, 3 times as often as the third, in that smooth descending curve that linguists call Zipf's law, the signature that languages leave behind almost without exception, English and Latin and Arabic alike. The words have what look like prefixes and suffixes. They cluster in ways that resemble grammar. Certain words appear more often in the plant pages and others in the star pages, as though the vocabulary shifts with the subject the way real vocabulary does. The measured information content of it sits somewhere between English and the more heavily inflected languages. It does not read like a random scattering of meaningless shapes. It reads, statistically, like a language carrying meaning, and yet no one alive can say what that meaning is. And the book is organized too, the way a real book is organized, not scattered, not random, but laid out in sections, each with its own character, as though it were meant to be used for something. The scholars who have cataloged it divide it into roughly 6 parts by the pictures, since the words give nothing away. There is the largest part, the herbal section, more than 100 pages of plants, 1 or 2 to a page, root and stem and leaf and flower drawn in faded blue and green and ochre, with a few paragraphs of text wound carefully around each one, in exactly the format of the medical herbals that were common across Europe in that age. There is an astronomical section, full of circular diagrams, suns and moons and stars arranged in wheels, some of them holding the figures of what might be the signs of the zodiac. There is a section the scholars call biological, where small unclothed figures stand in pools and channels of green liquid, connected by tubes as though something were flowing through them. There is a cosmological section of folding pages that open out into great medallions and maps of some unnamed scheme of things. There is a pharmaceutical section with jars and labeled fragments of plants the way an apothecary might keep them. And at the end there is a long run of short paragraphs, each marked with a little star in the margin, the section that is often simply called the recipes, 300 small entries, each one apparently a separate thought, neatly set down. It has the shape of a working book, a reference, a thing someone built to be consulted. That too is part of the puzzle. It is not the look of a hoax meant only to dazzle. It is the look of a book that meant something to whoever made it. That is the genuine, durable mystery, stated plainly and without exaggeration. Not a curse, not a haunting, not a message from somewhere beyond. Simply this, a real book, carefully ordered, made by a real and skillful hand in the early 15th century, written fluently in a script that follows the deep patterns of language, and unread in 600 years by anyone at all. And it is not for lack of trying. This is the part worth dwelling on gently because it dissolves the last little fear that there might be something willful in the book's silence, something that resists us on purpose. The truth is the opposite. The Voynich Manuscript is one of the most studied documents on the face of the earth, and the people who have studied it are not cranks shouting in the dark. They are some of the finest minds of the code-breaking age. William Friedman, the man who led the American team that broke Japan's most secret diplomatic cipher during the Second World War, one of the greatest cryptanalysts who ever lived, spent decades of his spare hours on this book, gathered colleagues into a study group, brought to bear the full force of a mind that had cracked codes nations believed unbreakable. And at the end of all those years, he laid down his honest conclusion, which was not a solution but a careful, humble guess about what kind of thing the book might be. He did not crack it. The greatest codebreaker of his century did not crack it, and there is something steadying in that rather than something frightening, the sight of a brilliant and disciplined person reaching the edge of what could be known, and saying so plainly and setting the work down. He was one of many. Armies of the patient and the clever have come at this book from every angle the human mind can devise. Long before the war, before computers, the cipher hunters worked it by hand. After the war, the codebreakers turned their wartime machinery on it. And in our own time, the work has only widened. Linguists, statisticians, historians of medieval medicine, botanists trying to match the impossible plants to real ones, computer scientists running the text through the great pattern-finding engines of the modern age, the same kinds of systems that translate between living languages in an instant. The full apparatus of 21st century analysis has been turned on these pages, and still the book keeps its counsel. Every few years someone announces a breakthrough, a Turkic language, a lost dialect, a shorthand for medieval Latin, an elaborate hoax with a hidden method, and the announcement makes the newspapers, and for a little while the world leans in. And then the wider community of scholars examines the claim carefully and without cruelty, and finds that it explains a few pages and then breaks down that it cannot carry the whole book the way a true key would. And the manuscript settles back into its silence, patient as ever, unoffended, unsolved. What is so quietly wonderful about this present moment in the book's long life is that the search has become open to everyone. For most of its 6 centuries, the manuscript was locked away, passed privately between owners, hidden in a Jesuit college, sealed in a collector's trunk, accessible only to the few who could travel to it and be granted permission to turn its fragile pages. But Yale, which received it as a gift in 1969, has done a generous and modern thing. The whole book has been photographed in high resolution, every leaf, every diagram, every faded margin, and placed freely on the internet for anyone in the world to study. You do not need credentials. You do not need to travel to New Haven. You could tonight, from wherever you are, call up those pages on a screen and zoom in close enough to see the individual strokes of a pen that moved 600 years ago, the small irregularities of the vellum, the places where a color has faded. The most mysterious book in the world is also, now, one of the most freely available. In a single recent year, more than 150,000 people went looking for it through Yale's library alone, one of the most sought-after things in their entire vast collection. So picture, if you like, the strange and gentle community that has grown up around this unreadable book. Scattered all across the earth, in 100 countries and a dozen languages, there are people who love this manuscript, not despite the fact that it cannot be read, but because of it. There are professional scholars, and there are retired engineers, and there are curious teenagers, and there are people who simply could not sleep one night and went looking for a mystery and found this one and never quite let it go. They share their findings in quiet corners of the internet, in long, patient threads and careful papers. They argue gently. They build painstaking transcriptions of the text so that the machines can study it. They photograph their attempts and post them for others to check. They are, in their scattered and unhurried way, doing the most peaceful kind of work there is, sitting down with the actual thing and looking at it honestly, asking for nothing but the chance to look. It is one of the gentlest collaborations in the world, this slow international vigil kept around a book that gives up nothing. Nobody is getting rich. Nobody is in danger. People are simply paying attention together to something beautiful and strange for the pure pleasure of the attention itself. And now we come to the soft turn at the end of the long night, the place where the mystery stops being a problem to be solved and becomes instead something to rest beside. Because here is the question worth asking, lying there in the dark: why should it trouble us at all that a book cannot be read? Why is the impulse so often to feel a kind of itch at an unsolved thing, a small frustration, a wish to have it finished and filed away? There is another way to hold it. There is a way in which an unsolved book, 600 years silent, is not a frustration but a comfort, one of the gentlest comforts there is. Think of what the secret of this book actually does in the world. It harms no one. In an age that has measured and mapped and cataloged nearly everything, that has photographed the floor of the ocean and the far side of the moon and the inside of the atom, that can hardly leave any quiet corner unlit, here is one small, harmless thing that has held its own counsel through all of it. It asked nothing of the centuries that passed it from hand to hand. It demanded no belief, started no war, cost no one their fortune, except perhaps the gentle currency of a few quiet hours given gladly. It simply persisted, patiently being itself, keeping the thing it knows. There's a kind of dignity in that. The secret that hurts nobody is one of the most innocent things in the world, the dignity of a closed door that no one is hammering on, a sealed letter that no one is owed, quiet that costs nothing to leave undisturbed. We are taught so often that every mystery is a debt the world owes us, a question that must be paid off, a darkness that must be lit. But that is not quite true, and the soul knows it isn't. Some of the loveliest things in a life are the ones we never fully understood and never needed to, the look on a face we loved, the meaning of a dream, the feeling of a certain afternoon light through a window in childhood. We do not solve those things, we hold them. They are richer for not being reduced to an answer. And consider how little in the end the not knowing actually costs us, how the mystery loses none of its beauty for being unsolved, but keeps all of it. The impossible plants are no less lovely for matching nothing that grows. The wheels of stars turn just as gently whether or not we can read the small words around their rims. The little figures rest just as peacefully in their green pools, whether the channels are veins or pipes or something dreamed. A solved mystery is a wonderful thing, but it is also in a quiet way a spent thing. The door opened, the room entered, the wonder used up and put away. This book keeps its wonder whole and fresh and unspent precisely because no one has used it up, because the door stands forever just barely closed, the room beyond it forever just out of sight, full of everything anyone might imagine it to hold. It renews itself every time a new person lines it. It has given itself freely to the imagination of every age that has met it, and asked nothing back but that we let it be. That is a rare and gentle kind of richness, and it costs the world nothing, and it will outlast us all. And maybe the Voynich Manuscript, lying in its cool vault under the soft marble light, is something like that, not a problem the human race has failed to finish, but a small, reserved place where wonder is allowed to remain, intact, unspent, kept safe for us whether we ever read it or not. Perhaps it will be deciphered someday by some patient mind or some patient machine, and that would be a fine thing, a small and harmless triumph. And perhaps it never will be, and that would be a fine thing too, a corner of the world left gently in shadow, a thing that stays beautiful precisely because it stays unsaid. There is even a kindness in being excused from the answer. So much of a day is spent solving, fixing what is broken, deciding what is unsettled, closing what is open, carrying the long weight of all the things still unresolved. To be handed at the end of it one beautiful thing that you are entirely released from solving, that the cleverest people of 6 centuries have laid down unsolved without shame and without harm, that is a small mercy, you may take it. You are allowed to simply look at the wheels of stars and the faded flowers and not know, and let the not knowing be a place of rest rather than a place of work. You can let that settle into you now, soft and warm. There is no urgency in it. The book is safe. It has been safe for 600 years, and it will be safe tonight, resting in the dark of its vault while the marble walls hold back the light, keeping perfectly still, asking nothing of you or of anyone. Whatever it knows, it is in no hurry to tell, and you are under no obligation to learn it. The question can simply wait. It has all the time in the world. It has more time than you do, and that is all right. It will keep the question warm for you while you sleep. So let us go back softly one last time and gather up the things we carried through these long, quiet hours and lay each of them gently down to rest, the way you might turn off the lamps in a room one by one before bed. Let the vellum rest, those calfskin pages, cut from a herd that grazed somewhere in Central Europe 6 centuries ago, scraped smooth and stretched and bound, holding their ink as faithfully now as on the day it dried. Let the carbon dating instruments rest, their work done, their narrow window of years confirmed and set down. There is nothing more they need to measure tonight. Let the unreadable script rest, those flowing, confident strokes, written out by a calm hand in a room you will never see, fluent and unhurried, page after page, in a language that follows all the deep laws of language and yet says nothing we can hear. Let it keep its meaning a little longer. It has kept it this long. Let the impossible garden rest, with its plants that grow nowhere on earth, its roots and leaves and blossoms that no botanist has ever matched to a living thing. Let the wheels of stars turn slowly in their circles, their suns and moons and small inscriptions wheeling on through the dark the way the real stars are wheeling now, far above the roof over your head. Let the little bathing figures rest in their green pools and channels, whatever they were ever meant to mean, harmless and quiet on their faded pages. Let the long chain of owners rest, the alchemist, the emperor's court, the Jesuit college, the collector who gave the book its name, all the hands that held it and passed it on and have themselves long since been laid to rest, their work of carrying it now complete. Let William Friedman rest, the great codebreaker, his study group disbanded, his honest, unfinished conclusions set down with grace. Let all the patient searchers rest, the professionals and the amateurs alike scattered across the earth, their transcriptions saved, their long threads quiet for the night, their gentle vigil paused until morning. The book does not need watching. It can be left alone in the dark. And let yourself rest now, most of all. We have come a long, long way together tonight, through 6 centuries and across an ocean and into a small, cool vault under a marble light, following one quiet book that nobody can read. And there is nothing left for you to carry. Every fact has been laid out as plainly as the evidence allows, the real vellum, the real ink, the fluent hand, the language-like text, the centuries of honest, failing, generous attempts to read it. And the one true mystery that remains is small and harmless and kind. It is not a threat, it is not a question pressing in on you out of the dark. It is only a book, in only a room, keeping only a secret that costs no one anything at all. The vault is cool and still. The pages lie flat and quiet in the dark, their colors dim, their ink at rest. The marble light has long since gone out for the night above them. No one is turning the leaves, no one is hammering at the door of the secret. The book simply waits, the way it has waited through every night for 600 years, patient and untroubled, in no hurry at all to be understood. There is nothing out there in the dark to fear. There never was, only a small book in a quiet room, keeping its harmless secret, and the slow wheel of the real stars turning overhead, and all the patient searchers gone home to their beds. The mystery is safe, it will keep, it does not need you tonight. Breathe out. Let the last of the day go with it. Let the question wait until morning, or until some other morning, or until no morning at all. It does not mind. It will keep itself warm in the dark. You are safe, you are warm, you are almost there. Sleep well.